Our story starts in a regular classroom, but the atmosphere is pure humiliation. Money is thrown straight into Sushun's face while people mock him for being poor. The message is obvious. He's a nobody, and he should stay far away from Ansi Jing. The hierarchy in that room is absolute. Everyone keeps their distance, as if poverty were contagious, reinforcing the idea that he and Ansi belong to completely different worlds. Things escalate when Wang Teng, the vice dean's son, decides to join in. In his eyes, Sushun doesn't even have the right to look at someone like Ansi. The room fills with laughter until everything suddenly stops. The doors burst open. Mr. Lee, a powerful executive from the multinational Law King Jun, walks in with his security team. The entire class freezes. Nobody understands why someone this important would show up for a broke student. Then comes the moment that flips everything. Mr. Lee and his entire escort bow to Sushun. Out loud, they beg him to return and take control of the corporation. Wang Teng's brain basically short-circuits. He quickly argues that Shun is just a mediocre student, but Mr. Lee cuts him off immediately. He reveals the truth no one in that room was ready to hear. Sushun isn't a nobody. He's the sole heir to the entire empire. Fear washes over Wang Teng as his world collapses. Sushun doesn't waste time explaining anything. He simply walks over and delivers a sharp slap across Wang Teng's face, shutting him up instantly. Then Shun turns to the stunned Ansi Jing. Without hesitation, he pulls her by the waist and kisses her right in front of everyone. The room falls into absolute silence. Her face burns red with embarrassment and anger, but the power dynamic has completely shifted. Without another word, Sushun turns around and orders his escort to follow him, leaving behind nothing but shocked faces and a storm of whispers. Just 20 minutes earlier, things were completely different. Back then, Shun was just a college student worrying about a notification. The company president, Cao Chengming, had been in a serious accident. On top of that, he still had to deal with petty classroom bullying, like when Sillin threw a crumpled piece of paper at his head to get attention. At that moment, he was the easiest target in the room. Now, he's the one running the game. Memories start replaying in Shun's mind. He had noticed Ansi's interest before, but his empty bank account always stopped him from doing anything about it. Romance without money was a luxury he simply couldn't afford. But now the game has changed. The system has awakened. A notification appears. Activation successful. Shun now has the ability to change identities every week, gaining random abilities every time he completes a task. The first command appears. Switch identity. In an instant, the ordinary college student disappears. In his place stands the new president of Yun International. He now carries the bloodline of the sole heir, along with powerful bonuses, sharp business instincts, natural leadership, and unshakable composure. But the power comes with a deadline. He has 7 days to uncover the suspicious death of the former president and fully reclaim control of the empire. The noise of students leaving class suddenly pulls Shun back to reality. He's soaked in sweat, trying to figure out if all of this is real or just some kind of hallucination. Then Ansi Jing storms up to him, furious about being ignored. Shun tries to come up with an excuse, but Wang Teng's venomous voice cuts through the air, threatening him to never get close to her again. While tensions rise back at school, the scene shifts to luxury. Sushun now sits in a VIP seat, casually sipping an expensive wine, testing the weight of his new life. He's curious to see just how far this ride will go. Elsewhere, the vice director receives news that Mr. Lee has returned, but he doesn't seem worried at all. In his mind, that little kid is harmless, and he already has the company under control. What he doesn't know is that Mr. Lee is already introducing Sushun directly to Vice President Chen Jua, setting up the checkmate. Everything changed after the tragic death of Mr. Chow. Even with the chaos surrounding the succession, the will was clear. Every share now belongs to Sushun. He already knows his relationship with the vice president will be a battlefield, but his strategy is simple. Establish dominance and double the company's growth under his leadership. Mr. Lee warns him that Chen Jua is dangerous. People who cross him tend to disappear without a trace. Instead of backing down, Shun finds the situation exciting. Danger is exactly the spice he was missing. Knowing the board of directors is waiting in the lobby, he makes a bold move to test everyone's patience. He orders the meeting to happen at the main entrance, and, just to completely break protocol, he stops on the way to buy a milk tea. Meanwhile, tension explodes in the reception area. The board members are furious. They've been waiting for half a day. To them, it's unacceptable that some unknown kid with no resume is about to take the throne that should belong to Mr. Cheng. Arguments erupt between the old guard and those with new interest in the company. Then the car finally arrives. Sushun steps out calmly, holding his cup of milk tea like he's on a casual Sunday stroll. Chenjua approaches with a fake smile and extends his hand, trying to keep his superior attitude. He jokes about the delay and suggests that Shun shouldn't be interfering in adult business. Shun barely listens. To him, Chenjua looks like nothing more than a loud barking dog. Before the man can finish his sentence, slap. Su Shun smashes his hand across Chenjua's face. The silence afterward is deafening. Without even looking back, leaving his enemy humiliated in front of everyone, Shun walks straight into the conference room. There, Mr. Lee introduces his new ally, Secretary Liu Yu, ready to begin the real power game. Wasting no time, Su Shun takes control and orders the secretary to prepare 3 cups of tea. The room that once mocked him now feels the weight of his presence. He sits down calmly, almost relaxed, satisfied that all his targets are gathered in one place. An interruption comes quickly. One of the board members tries to question the inheritance. A cup of tea flies straight at him. Shun's reflex is instant, just like his authority. Mr. Lee watches in shock as the young man calmly finishes his sentence without being disrespected again. He is the new president, and he wants to hear what they have to say. The silence that follows is absolute. No one dares to give the first answer. Shun's aggressive charisma impresses even the most skeptical people in the room. Sensing that the kid is actually willing to listen, Chenjua lets out a cynical chuckle and throws out the bait. If Shun really wants to prove himself and silence the company's doubts, he should close an impossible deal, a partnership with Taishan Corporation, the group's biggest rival. Mr. Lee instantly explodes in anger at the obvious trap. Chenjua responds by throwing a glass of water straight at him, but the glass never hits. With perfect timing, Su Shun catches it mid-air before it reaches his ally. The entire room freezes. Instead of backing down, Shun raises the stakes. Chenjua offers him 1 month to secure a contract with Taishan, but the new president, with the confidence of someone who has already won, cuts the deadline down to 1 week. The meeting ends under the weight of that seemingly suicidal promise. Determined, Shun turns to the receptionist to give his next orders while the board members whisper among themselves, trying to figure out if he's a genius or completely insane. The laughter starts the moment the conference room door closes. Chenjua celebrates what he believes is an early checkmate, while the flattering board members already declare victory. To them, Su Shun is just an arrogant kid digging his own grave, and Mr. Lee is a fool for backing him. The old vice president barely hides his contempt. He still refuses to accept that the late president, Cao Chengming, left the entire empire to someone he considers an idiot. In his mind, Shun's failure is inevitable, and when it happens, he plans to step in and claim power himself. But inside the car, the mood couldn't be more different. Ignoring the mockery, Su Shun quietly studies the reports. Mr. Lee tries to convince him to abandon the suicidal bet, but Shun interrupts him with a direct question about the former president's death. The official police report says it was a traffic accident, but the system wouldn't create a mission based on coincidence. Shun studies the details. A garbage truck crushed the president's car at an intersection. The driver followed that same route every day, the perfect alibi for a carefully planned crime. Without wasting time, Shun gives a clear order. Mr. Lee needs to go to the police station and keep a close eye on the truck driver. That man is the key to everything. While Mr. Lee leaves for the task, the secretary hands Shun a file on the president of their rival company, Taishan Corporation. The name Anantian sounds strangely familiar. When he opens the file, the shock hits instantly. The photos in the news articles reveal a face he knows very well. It's Ansi Jing, the same girl from his classroom, a coincidence explosive enough to connect both worlds. Far away from all that, Ansi Jing steps out of the shower, still trying to process the rumors spreading around campus. How did the poor scholarship student she used to humiliate suddenly become the owner of a multinational corporation? Before she can think it through, her phone starts vibrating. Nervous, she makes up an excuse to her friends and rushes outside. Under the lonely light of a street lamp, a shadow approaches. Suddenly, someone grabs her from behind. Startled, her heart jumps, thinking it's a stranger. She reacts purely on instinct, grabbing the attacker's arm and throwing him straight to the ground. Only then does she hear the voice. Between laughter and short breaths, the man on the pavement tries to explain who he is and who's really in charge now. Reality hits Ansi Jing all at once when she realizes the attacker on the ground is actually Su Shun. Embarrassed apologies follow, both of them blushing, while Shun struggles to believe how strong the girl really is after she pinned him down so easily. The tense atmosphere from school slowly fades into a quiet walk through the night. The teasing starts almost immediately. Shun reminds her about the kiss she didn't exactly reject earlier, which makes her face burn with embarrassment. The mask of the poor student is completely gone now. Shun makes it clear that he finally has the means to give her the life she deserves. The tears in her eyes confirm what years of indifference had been hiding. But even in the middle of this romantic moment, Shun makes a strategic move. He casually asks about her father, the owner of Taishan Corporation. At first, she gets annoyed, accusing him of forgetting something she told him 5 years ago. But soon she understands what he's doing. If Shun wants to dominate Qinjun, Taishan's support is the missing pillar. Their moment is suddenly interrupted by a phone call. The truck driver, the only witness to President Cao's accident, has just committed suicide. It's the first sign that someone is already cleaning up loose ends. Shun quickly says goodbye and rushes off, but the danger doesn't wait for him to reach his destination. As he crosses the street, the headlights of a speeding car suddenly lock onto him. The impact seems unavoidable. Then another car appears out of nowhere, swerving directly into the attacker's path in a desperate maneuver. The assassin's car speeds away, disappearing into the night. Shun stands there frozen, realizing how close he just came to dying. From the rescue vehicle, a panicked Mr. Lee jumps out. He acted at the last possible second to protect his new boss. Meanwhile, inside a dark luxury office, the atmosphere is strangely celebratory. Chenjua calmly finishes his drink. The driver's mistake wasn't a failure, it was a message. He didn't want 2 dead presidents in one night. Not yet. Back in Shun's office, Mr. Lee pieces everything together and explodes with rage. The warning has been delivered. The battle for power is no longer just business. It's now officially a matter of life and death. Shun's delay almost cost him his life, but the truth that follows is even darker. Inside the police station, the truck driver supposedly took his own life in isolation. A letter was left behind, claiming he couldn't handle the debt caused by the accident. Mr. Lee accepts the official explanation. Shun doesn't. To him, the story is obviously fake. A man with no family wouldn't kill himself over debt. If he really chose death, it was to secure someone else's future, someone hiding in the shadows. Shun gives a new order. Dig through the driver's entire past until they find the trail of money. While the investigation heats up, family drama explodes inside the An family mansion. Lixiu is screaming at her husband Nantian, furious that he can't control their daughter. The reason? Ansi Jing spent the entire night out chasing some poor nobody, while the perfect heir, Xiao Cheng, waited for her until dawn. The atmosphere is humiliating for the wealthy suitor, who is clearly losing patience with the family's lack of discipline. Then the front door opens, and everyone freezes. Ansi Jing walks in smiling, with Su Shun right beside her. The silence in the room is broken by Shun's bold introduction. He calmly announces himself as her official boyfriend, and even offers a bag of fruit as a polite gift. Her brother John Jun instantly explodes in rage. He kicks the bag across the floor, sending apples rolling everywhere, unable to accept that a nobody would dare step into their home. But Shun doesn't move. With a sarcastic smile, he compliments the family's excellent manners while the fruit rolls across the room. Jianjun tries to charge at him but is stopped by his father's shout. Nantian studies the boy with a mixture of anger and strange curiosity, because one thing is obvious. Su Shun doesn't have the fear in his eyes that a poor man should have. The game inside the Taishan mansion has officially begun, and the chess pieces are about to start flying. Su Shun was about to reveal the truth, but Xiao Chen's arrogance cuts through the moment. The heir of Kangshan Steel puffs out his chest and proudly boasts that he'll soon control everything. Then, in a predictable move, he tosses a bank card onto the floor. Inside, it is $1 million. His offer is simple. Take the money and disappear from Ansi Jing's life forever. The tension exploded when a slap cracked across Xiao Chen's face. Ansi stepped in immediately, exposing the rich heir's hypocrisy. The same guy who preached humility had no problem using his wealth and status to humiliate others. Xiao Chen laughed it off, mocking Shun's supposed insignificance. Shun calmly bent down and picked up the bank card from the floor, but not out of greed. He slipped it into his pocket and made a sharp comment about how someone shouldn't waste their parents' money in such a pathetic way. Ansi's parents watched the scene unfold, torn between amusement and curiosity. When Xiao Chen demanded that the family choose a son-in-law based purely on status, Shun finally dropped the bomb. He was the new president of Qinjun International. The laughter died in Xiao Chen's throat as the realization slowly hit. The entire room froze. Even Ansi's father, normally unshakable, looked stunned. Xiao Chen tried to keep his composure, calling Shun a fraud, but fate had other plans. On the TV in the background, a news broadcast suddenly announced the death of the former president and the reading of his will. Then the screen filled with the image of Su Shun, the 19-year-old heir who had just inherited the entire empire. The silence in the room became deafening. Xiao Chen's defeat was complete. Sensing the shift in power, Nantian instantly changed his tone, already thinking about a future partnership with the new tycoon. While the former suitor stood there sweating in fear, Shun casually mentioned that he had urgent matters to handle. Without another explanation, he walked across the room and slammed the door behind him, leaving the stunned family and his humiliated rival behind. Back inside the Taishan mansion, the attitude toward Shun changed in seconds. Jianjun, who had just kicked the fruit bag earlier, suddenly tried to hug him like an old friend. Lixiu grabbed his arm, insisting that he sit down and join them at the table. Their interest in his new status was painfully obvious, but Nantian suddenly killed the mood. Despite Shun's position, he declared that he would never do business with Qinjun and demanded that Shun leave immediately. Ansi Jing couldn't understand her father's sudden hostility. Shun, however, remained completely calm. He had already done his homework. Before coming here, he had someone investigate the reason behind the long-standing feud between Nantian and the late Mr. Chow. As Nantian nervously tried to keep his composure, Shun began reading out loud some very uncomfortable details he had uncovered, including stories about Nantian's youth alongside Mr. Chow. Panic instantly flashed across Nantian's face. Desperate to silence him before his wife heard any more secrets, he quickly changed his tone. Grabbing Shun by the arm, he dragged him into his office and begged him to sign a cooperation agreement immediately. As the documents were laid out on the desk, Shun delivered the final blow. He casually asked if Nantian's decades-long rivalry with Mr. Chow had really started because of a woman. The fear in Nantian's eyes confirmed everything. He would sign anything to keep that secret buried. 2 days later, the news of the partnership hit Qinjun's board like a bomb. Chenjua shattered his porcelain teacup in rage when he heard that the little kid had managed to bend Nantian, something no one had been able to do for years. His secretary suggested that Shun's connection with Ansi Jing might have been the key, but blinded by hatred, Chenjua refused to accept the loss. Instead, he began planning a far dirtier move to bring the young heir down. Meanwhile, the system delivered another warning. Only 4 days remained. Lying in bed, Su Shun closed his eyes, knowing the final stage of the game was about to begin. The mood in the office the next day was heavy. Shun sat there quietly, frustrated that the pieces of the puzzle still didn't fully connect, until Mr. Lee burst into the room with a shocking discovery. The truck driver involved in the accident had a secret. He had a daughter studying at an expensive school, something he could never possibly afford. Shun understood immediately. The crime hadn't been random. It had been financed and planned years in advance. Realizing they were dealing with professionals, Mr. Lee wasted no time hiring elite protection. The door opened, and several men walked in wearing casual clothes, but their posture and presence made it obvious. These were former Special Forces soldiers. Impressed, Shun accepted the protection, but his attention quickly shifted to a photograph. The man in the picture was named Lu Jun, Chen Jua's personal attack dog. The name sounded familiar to Shun, and suddenly a connection with his secretary started making sense. At that very moment, somewhere in the company's hallway, Lu Jun had Liu Yu pinned against the wall. He reminded her who gave her that job in the first place. Under pressure and threats, the secretary begged for mercy, revealing that her father's fate depended on her cooperation in this dangerous plan. Completely unaware of the drama unfolding outside, Su Shun stretched in his chair, exhausted. When he stepped out of the office, his 5 new bodyguards shouted in perfect unison, bowing respectfully. All Shun wanted was to go home, but the intense professionalism of the escort caught him off guard. At the far end of the room, Liu Yu sat frozen at her computer, pretending to work while the pressure closed in around her. Shun passed her desk and casually said he was leaving, but the secretary quickly stopped him. Her car had broken down, she explained, and she needed a ride home. Without hesitation, Shun agreed. The elite bodyguards opened the car door with military precision, and the drive continued until they reached her apartment building. When they arrived, instead of leaving, Shun made another move. He asked if he could come upstairs for a glass of water. Liu Yu rushed ahead nervously, while the bodyguards outside exchanged knowing looks, convinced their boss would be spending the night there. Inside, the apartment was a complete mess. Piles of dirty clothes covered the place, clear signs of exhaustion and stress. Shun sat down on the couch surrounded by the chaos while Liu Yu, her face burning with embarrassment, rushed around cleaning everything as fast as she could. But in the kitchen, the mood was far darker. Liu Yu held a small pill Lu Jun had given her. The plan was simple. Drug Su Shun, take compromising photos, and destroy his reputation. With no way out, she dropped the pill into the glass of water. Meanwhile, in the living room, Shun studied the photo frames on the wall. Calmly, he asked about her family. He was testing the waters. When Liu Yu handed him the glass, she almost gave everything away when Shun suddenly asked what her relationship with Lu Jun was. She quickly lied, claiming they just had the same name. Shun smiled as if he believed her. Under her terrified gaze, he drank the entire glass in one go. When he stood up to leave, panic hit her. The drug hadn't kicked in yet. Desperate, she shouted and made up a complicated question just to keep him there longer. Shun calmly returned to the couch, pretending he was about to answer while the clock kept ticking. Outside, the bodyguards were casually smoking until one of them received a short message from the president. "Turn off your phones." The trap was closing. Inside the apartment, things began to change. The internet signal that had covered the entire place suddenly went dead. On Shun's order, his men outside were cutting every connection. He had given them 5 minutes to make the digital blackout complete. At the same time, the medicine started taking effect. But it wasn't the sleep Liu Yu had expected. The drug was actually a powerful aphrodisiac. Shun understood the setup immediately. Seeing Liu Yu's condition and noticing a faint red light glowing from a wall socket, he realized they were both targets. On the other side of that hidden camera, Lu Jun and his men were watching everything unfold, waiting for the scandal they planned to capture. The tension in the room rose fast. Liu Yu's vision blurred, and the intensity of the drug even caused her nose to start bleeding. But the villain's entertainment ended early. With the bodyguards blocking the signal, the transmission suddenly cut off at the worst possible moment, leaving Lu Jun furious in the dark. In her dazed state, Liu Yu barely understood when Shun suddenly pushed her onto the bed and called her a fool for letting herself be used as bait. Then he rushed out of the room, burning with heat, demanding ice to fight the chemical effect spreading through his body. One of the bodyguards quickly entered the apartment to secure the president. He found the secretary barely conscious on the couch, while Shun tried to recover under freezing water in the shower. When Shun stepped out, soaked and breathing heavily, he ignored the guard's sarcastic comments and gave a direct order. "Find the hidden camera immediately." Liu Yu panicked and tried to defend herself, claiming she only knew about the pills. Shun didn't care about excuses. While getting dressed, he ordered her to search the entire room until she found the device that almost destroyed both their reputations. He had already figured out the truth. Sleeping pills wouldn't create a real scandal. The plan was to drug them with something strong enough to force an intimate situation and ruin him publicly. The realization hit Liu Yu hard. Moments later, the bodyguard pulled the first hidden camera straight out of the power socket. Shun ordered a full sweep of the apartment. He was sure the place had been turned into a surveillance nest. As the men searched the rooms, Liu Yu completely broke down. She was stunned when she realized Shun already knew about her connection to Lu Jun, the man who had been using her like a disposable pawn. Through tears, she confessed everything. 15 years earlier, her father had abandoned her and her sick mother to live with another woman. They reunited 3 years ago, when he suddenly reappeared with a job opportunity for her at the company. She had believed she owed her life to him. Now the evidence in front of her showed the truth. It had all been a trap. The bodyguard soon found 3 more hidden cameras, one in the bedroom and another carefully hidden in the bathroom. Shun tossed the devices in his hand, forcing her to face the cruelty of Lu Jun's plan. The bodyguard was furious at the villain's audacity, but Shun was already thinking several moves ahead. He intended to take down Chen Jua, but first, he needed both father and daughter to play on his side. As he prepared to leave, he left the secretary alone with her tears and bitter memories. Liu Yu sat there holding the cameras, remembering the day she first came to the city, desperate for work. She had been rejected and humiliated everywhere until her father suddenly appeared with what seemed like salvation. Now she understood that help had come with a price. Outside, rain pounded the pavement as Liu Yu collapsed to her knees, completely broken. Through her tears, she only wanted her mother's comfort. But years earlier, when her father had appeared behind her like a last hope, she chose to trust him again. She believed he was the only family she had left. She had no idea it was all a cruel lie. From outside a door nearby, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses revealed the truth. Lu Jun was bragging to his drunk friends about how he had manipulated his own daughter for years. Between drinks, he proudly admitted that he had secretly arranged for companies to reject her job applications so he could later appear as the hero offering her a position. His friends praised him for the dirty strategy of using his own daughter as a spy. Outside, Liu Yu heard everything. The betrayal shattered her. Meanwhile, inside the luxury car, one of Shun's bodyguards couldn't hide his concern. Why keep a secretary who had betrayed him? He understood that betraying a boss was easier than betraying a father, but it still felt dangerous to keep someone connected to Chen Jua so close. Shun remained completely calm. For him, loyalty wasn't about feelings. It was about results. Hearing that, the bodyguard reaffirmed the absolute loyalty of his elite team. Watching Shun through the rearview mirror, he couldn't help being impressed. Despite his young age, the president handled financial crises and enemy attacks without even showing stress. He seemed almost unshakable. On his phone, Shun calmly watched videos from online streamers, already anticipating that the content about to leak would soon become his rival's worst nightmare. When he finally arrived home, exhaustion hit him. Shun yawned as he remembered the system's countdown. Only 2 days remained to complete the mission, but he felt no panic. This coldness, this ability to deal with chaos, felt like a gift from his new identity, and he was ready for the final checkmate. His rest didn't last long. A desperate knock came at the door. Liu Yu stood there, breathless, begging for just a few minutes. Once inside, the words poured out like a flood. Her anger toward her father burned inside her. For the first time, she clearly saw how he had used her like a disposable tool all these years. With tears streaming down her face, she offered to help destroy Lu Jun. She was willing to do anything for revenge. Shun stayed calm. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he told her he would help her escape the nightmare, but only if she played on his side. The next morning, Lu Jun's mask began to crack. He showed up at his daughter's apartment ready to collect the hidden cameras and the evidence of the scandal. Instead, he found Liu Yu waiting for him. The shock was immediate. When she confronted him about the secret surveillance and betrayal, Lu Jun chose the most cowardly defense possible. He blamed everything on Director Chen, claiming he had acted behind his back. While pretending to be a loving father and promising she would become a company director once the job was done, Liu Yu simply stared at him. She could see right through the emptiness of his lies. Liu Yu pretended she didn't know anything and suggested they talk in private. They went upstairs, and Lu Jun, impatient, kept asking questions about the night with Su Shun and whether the compromising photos were secured. Inside the apartment, he even had the nerve to introduce his own wife, who had never met Liu Yu, as if his daughter were just a co-worker. The moment they stepped into his office, Liu Yu's patience ran out. Following Shun's plan, she knew she had to access her father's computer. Lu Jun noticed the memory cards were still in her hands and tried to grab them, but the game suddenly changed. With a cold stare, she stopped him and set the price for her loyalty, 8 million yuan. That was the cost to hand over what he wanted. The blackmail had turned against the master. Lu Jun burned with rage when he realized his own daughter was auctioning the recordings, even hinting that Su Shun would pay much more for them. But he had no choice. If the scandal plan against the president failed, everything would collapse. Still, Lu Jun had no intention of paying out of his own pocket. He asked for 10 minutes and left the room to beg Director Chen for the money. That was his fatal mistake. The second he turned his back, Liu Yu acted with surgical precision. She plugged Su Shun's flash drive into her father's laptop, infecting the system with an undetectable Trojan. On the other end, Shun was monitoring everything. He promised her a fortune if she could extract the data he needed. When the bodyguards overheard the amounts being discussed, they were stunned by how high the stakes had become. Liu Yu was sweating, but she managed to crack the hidden folder before her father returned. When Lu Jun walked back in, proud after speaking with Chen, he found his daughter pacing around the office, pretending to be frustrated because she couldn't find any photos of her mother in the room. She kept the pressure on, demanding payment first. Cornered, Lu Jun transferred the millions. Liu Yu's smile confirmed the betrayal. She refused to show the video there, claiming she didn't want to watch something like that with her father present. Lu Jun didn't suspect a thing. He believed he now had the material he needed to turn Ansi Jing against Su Shun. What he didn't know was that the video was already in far more dangerous hands. Meanwhile, at the company headquarters, Chen Zhua watched as Ansi Jing parked her car outside with a predatory look in his eyes. He immediately called an emergency board meeting. In his office, Su Shun received the summons. He stood up calmly, knowing this would be the final battle for the empire. Back at the apartment, Liu Yu collapsed to the floor, pretending to faint so her father, in panic, would reveal the location of other evidence he was still hiding. Just then, Lu Jun's phone rang. Director Chen was furious. He had just learned that the memory cards were already in Ansi Jing's hands. Panic spread even further when Ansi's brother, Jian Yang, stormed into Qin Yun Company's headquarters. He staged a dramatic scene, loudly accusing Su Shun of betraying his sister and dishonoring their alliance with Taishan. Ansi Jing joined the act, pretending to cry while her brother demanded answers. Chen Zhua watched everything like a spectator enjoying the show, convinced the young president's reputation was about to collapse. Shun remained completely calm. He suggested they speak privately, but Chen Zhua had other plans. Instead, he opened the doors and allowed a crowd of journalists and reporters inside under the excuse of transparency and justice. Surrounded by flashing cameras, Su Shun seemed trapped, but Chen Zhua's trap was about to explode in his own hands. Ansi Jing wiped her tears and opened the laptop, claiming she would show the final proof of Shun's betrayal. Chen Zhua smiled, expecting the compromising photos to appear on the screen, but what played instead froze the entire room. The video didn't show an affair. It showed hidden camera footage of Lu Jun and his accomplices discussing the plan to murder former President Cao. Cold sweat rolled down Chen Zhua's face as the reporters realized this wasn't a romance scandal. It was evidence of premeditated murder. Chaos erupted instantly. Chen Zhua tried to order security to remove the press, but Su Shun's elite bodyguards stepped in, protecting the journalists and making sure the truth was broadcast live. Amid flashing cameras and shouting reporters, Shun walked up to his trapped rival with a cold smile. Then he calmly asked him to comment on the murder evidence in front of the entire country. Chen Zhua's entire scheme collapsed. Cornered by the footage, he made one last desperate move and tried to blame everything on his attack dog, Lu Jun. But betrayal ran both ways. Lu Jun had his own recordings prepared as insurance. Mr. Li soon arrived with the police. Under the flashing cameras of the press, both villains were led away in handcuffs. Su Shun's plan had worked perfectly. The system immediately confirmed the mission's success. The deadline had ended. A new week had begun, and with it came a new identity, the Lord, the most feared and efficient assassin in the world. Absolute stealth, master-level disguise skills, and lethal combat ability now ran through Shun's veins. His new objective was simple: tie up loose ends and survive the criminal underworld. Later, in the office, Mr. Li reported that the video would guarantee life sentences for the criminals. But Shun wasn't satisfied with slow justice. With a cold look that even unsettled his most loyal ally, he demanded the death penalty for both men and ordered the necessary arrangements to be made. Mr. Li left the room stunned. The young president had become something far more dangerous than just a businessman. To test his new reflexes, Shun picked up a pen. With a movement so fast it was almost invisible, he flicked it toward the wall. The pen pierced the concrete like a nail, punching straight through a stack of papers along the way. Shun smiled. He could feel the power of his new class. The final test of the day came from one of his elite bodyguards. Curious about the change in his boss's aura, the guard accepted Shun's challenge and attacked with full force. The huge man lunged forward with a heavy punch, but Su Shun didn't move. He simply watched the strike approach, almost in slow motion. Ready to prove that now, he was the predator at the top of the food chain. The punch came fast and heavy, packed with power, but Su Shun reacted on pure instinct. With a movement so subtle it was almost invisible, he delivered a light kick to the bodyguard's shoulder. The result was immediate. The big man stumbled back, screaming in pain, while Shun watched with clear annoyance, irritated by the exaggerated reaction as the man acted like his arm had been broken. Looking for a real challenge to test his new assassin abilities, Shun headed to an underground fight club. Hidden under a hood in the crowd, he watched the fighters in the ring with boredom, quietly muttering that he could beat them without effort. A nearby trainer overheard the comment and got furious, challenging him to prove it inside the ring. Shun accepted immediately, excited by the opportunity. The tension rose when the man, doubting the young man's slim appearance, swore he would shut down the club if Shun actually won. At that same moment, Xiao Cheng walked into the building to check on his investments. To his surprise, he found Su Shun preparing to fight. Seeing the perfect chance for revenge, Xiao Cheng bet 1 million on Shun's defeat, certain he would be destroyed. Shun's opponent was no ordinary fighter. Known in the underground as the Savage Monster, the foreign fighter had a brutal record in illegal arenas and was motivated by the promise of a huge payout. As the giant slammed his gloves together with murderous intent, Xiao Cheng watched from the side with a cruel smile, convinced Su Shun wouldn't last 10 seconds. The bell rang. The Savage Monster moved with complete confidence, believing 10 seconds would be enough to end Shun's life. His first punch came down like thunder, but Shun slipped away with insulting ease. Confused, the giant blamed the floor or a misstep while his trainer shouted angrily from the corner, unable to believe a normal-looking kid had reflexes like that. Bored with the slow pace, Shun decided to speed things up and challenge the monster to use his full strength. Insulted, the fighter unleashed his killing intent, turning into the beast no opponent had ever survived. Xiao Cheng watched with a cruel grin, waiting to see Shun's bones crushed for daring to steal his woman. The giant unleashed a storm of punches, but Shun calmly dodged every single one, even making jokes about the man's terrible aim. Humiliated, the monster demanded that Shun stop running and actually hit him. Shun granted the request immediately, When their fists collided, a sharp crack echoed through the club. The giant's arm bent in a horrifying zigzag, his bones shattering like glass. Silence filled the room for a moment before the fighter's screams of agony broke it. He collapsed on the floor, bleeding, as the crowd backed away in horror. Xiao Cheng spit out his drink in shock, realizing the real monster in the room wasn't the one he expected. He tried to leave the building before being noticed, but his phone rang in his pocket. It was Su Shun, calling from the ring while staring directly at him. Panic flooded Xiao Cheng as Shun stepped down from the ring and began walking toward him. His bodyguards tried to block the path, but they were knocked out instantly with precise blows to the head before they could even react. Shun grabbed Xiao Cheng by the neck, revealing he knew exactly who had sent the assassin. Sweating and stammering, Xiao Cheng struggled to speak. Shun gave him a final warning. This was his last chance. The next bone to break would be his neck. Without another word, Shun walked away, leaving behind fear and destruction. Rumors spread like wildfire after he left the club. Everyone was talking about the mysterious stranger who took down the savage monster and 2 elite bodyguards without breaking a sweat. Xiao Cheng burned with humiliation as people mocked him for being nothing more than a spoiled rich kid. Trying to save face, he called Ansi Jing and invited her to lunch, but she rejected him immediately. She told him to focus on studying and revealed she was already planning to donate $3 million to the university to secure the semester. Meanwhile, danger was watching from above. On top of a skyscraper, 2 professional snipers monitored Su Shun. One of them couldn't believe the legendary assassin could be someone so young, but she was still ready to pull the trigger. Then something impossible happened. From far below, Shun suddenly turned his head and looked straight at them. Panic hit instantly. The sniper couldn't understand how anyone could detect them from that distance. In the blink of an eye, Shun disappeared from their sight. Sensing danger in the air, Su Shun returned to his building. He knew Xiao Cheng couldn't have hired professionals of that level so quickly. These enemies belonged to the past of his new identity. To welcome them, he turned his residence into a fortress. Armored vehicles surrounded the building, 30 elite guards secured the area, and infrared sensors covered every angle. By nightfall, the snipers watched the house and felt disappointed. For someone known as the Lord, the defenses looked primitive. Inside, Shun calmly flipped through a magazine. He knew the obvious security was just bait to make his enemies feel confident and lower their guard. The silence broke when his phone rang. Unknown number. When he answered, the voice on the other side spoke directly using his codename. It was Tony, the official agent of the Supreme Lord, bringing the next step of the game. Shun was completely surprised when Tony used his personal number to offer an easy job. Even though he was retired, the payment of $3.5 million caught his attention. Tony tried to make it sound simple, saying the target was just the president of a major corporation in China and that he would send the file by email. The shock came when Shun opened the document. The target profile on the screen was his own. He nearly spit out his water in disbelief at the audacity of someone placing a bounty on his head. Meanwhile, on a sunny beach, Tony relaxed under an umbrella until he received a threatening phone call. Under pressure and fear, the agent finally revealed the truth. The client behind the contract was Han Xiao Cheng, the spoiled heir who had just unknowingly signed his own death sentence. Before Shun could even start planning a counterattack, the door burst open. Ansi Jing stormed into the apartment, furious because he had disappeared and forgotten the thank you dinner he had promised her. Without giving him time to explain, she grabbed his arm and dragged him out, reminding him that getting a table at that luxury restaurant was nearly impossible and that he owed her for being late. As they left the house, the unusual movement of security guards around the property didn't escape Ansi's notice. Shun simply gave a subtle signal to his elite bodyguard, ordering a few men to follow them from a distance. Their convoy headed down the road toward the restaurant, while predators waited in the shadows for the right moment to strike, unaware their target already knew every move they made. On the way, Ansi sensed the tension in the air and assumed Shun had noticed something dangerous and was waiting for backup. When they realized they would miss their reservation, she got even more irritated. Shun solved the problem in the most absurd way possible. With a single phone call, he bought the entire Grant Hotel and casually invited her to have lunch there the next day, leaving her speechless. With the mood already ruined, they ended up going to her house instead. Her brother was overseas and her parents were out at a meeting, leaving the place empty. While Ansi was cooking some pasta, Shun walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. When she tried to scold him, he silenced her with a deep kiss. Things heated up quickly. The moment didn't last long. The sound of a light switch snapping on shattered everything. The lights came on, revealing Ansi's parents standing there. They had returned early after their meeting was canceled. They had caught everything. Her father stared in disbelief, his daughter red with embarrassment, and Shun in a position that was impossible to explain. The excuse that they had accidentally fallen onto the couch didn't work, especially since he clearly saw Shun trying to zip up his pants. Shun was kicked out of the mansion immediately. He walked back to the car under the amused looks of his bodyguards, who didn't miss the chance to joke about their boss's short performance. Annoyed, Shun got behind the wheel and slammed the gas pedal. His anger wasn't just about getting caught. The assassins hired by Xiao Cheng still hadn't shown up, even after he had made himself vulnerable. Needing to release his frustration, he drove straight into enemy territory. When he arrived at the entrance, a guard tried to stop him. Shun wasn't interested in talking. With a cold stare, he demanded to know if Han Xiao Cheng was inside. The final confrontation was about to begin. The reception wasn't friendly. The guard tried to shove him back, but Shun moved first. One clean punch dropped the man to the ground, blood spilling from his mouth. The second guard pulled out a gun, but Shun reacted on pure instinct. He jammed the weapon's mechanism with his hand and knocked the man out with a precise strike to the neck before he could even understand what had happened. Inside, Xiao Cheng was entertaining company and hated the interruption. When he stormed to the door shouting for his men, he froze the moment he saw who was standing there. The girls inside ran away in panic. Trying to recover, Xiao Cheng changed his tone and even offered luxury escorts as an apology for what had happened at the fight club. Shun didn't even blink. He wasn't there to negotiate. Things escalated quickly when reinforcements arrived at the gate. Dozens of armed thugs surrounded Shun, laughing at the idea that he had shown up alone. Xiao Cheng regained his confidence and ordered them to beat him until that calm smile disappeared. One thug rushed forward with a machete. A single punch shattered his jaw. What followed was a one-sided massacre. Shun moved through the attackers like a ghost, dropping them one after another with brutal precision. Within seconds, Xiao Cheng's entire crew was lying on the ground. In the end, Shun lifted the last thug by the neck and slammed him against the wall, only letting him go when he realized Xiao Cheng had no more cards to play. Cornered and defenseless, Xiao Cheng tried one last desperate move. He challenged Shun to kill him. Then he delivered a quiet threat. Shun couldn't protect Ansi Jing 24 hours a day. Sooner or later, she would be kidnapped. That was the trigger. Su Shun exploded with rage, knocking Xiao Cheng to the ground with a brutal strike. The spoiled heir curled up on the floor, begging for mercy through tears and sobs. With his foot pressed against Xiao Cheng's chest, Shun warned him that if he ever touched Ansi, he would turn his life into hell. Xiao Cheng, still believing he was dealing with nothing more than a lucky businessman, tried to act brave, but his face went pale when Shun mentioned the $3.5 million contract placed on his own head. The shock was immediate. Only the client and the legendary assassin known as the Lord should have known about that. When Shun leaned close and quietly confirmed that he was the very man behind that title, pure terror took over Xiao Cheng. Then the windows exploded. Gunshots shattered the glass, and Shun jumped aside with superhuman reflexes. On the floor, Xiao Cheng screamed in panic while desperately trying to call the police with shaking hands. Shun grabbed him by the hair and forced him to look at the bullets tearing through the room. Those shooters weren't Xiao Cheng's men. They were professionals hunting the Lord. After spotting them on the rooftop of a nearby building, Shun decided the game would end right there. The sniper was watching the only exit through his scope, waiting for the target to run outside. Instead, he suddenly felt a sharp impact in his shoulder. Thinking it was debris, he tried to pull it out and froze in shock. It was a toothpick. Su Shun had thrown it with the force of a rifle shot. The distance should have made that impossible. But for an elite assassin like Shun, impossible didn't matter. In pure desperation, the sniper pulled the pin from a grenade with his teeth and hurled it towards Shun, still unable to understand how a tiny wooden toothpick had nearly pierced his armor from hundreds of meters away. Smoke from the grenade filled the rooftop, and the sniper used the chaos to make a desperate escape. He slid down the ropes, hoping the distance would be enough to get away from a monster like Su Shun. Wounded and gasping for air, he had barely touched the ground when a brutal kick slammed him into a wall. Shun wasn't there for a fair fight. He was playing with his prey. The man tried to fight back, pulling out his gun and firing wildly, but Shun had already vanished into the shadows of the alley. In a superhuman move, the Lord dropped from above and crushed his opponent with a blow that made him spit blood. Lifting the man by the neck near the edge of the building, Shun calmly gave him 10 seconds to reveal who had hired him. The sniper pretended to give in, but tried one last trick by pulling a knife from his belt. Before the blade could even move through the air, Shun simply let go. The man's body fell into the darkness below, but fate had other plans. A black SUV sped past at that exact moment, breaking his fall. Seconds later, a convoy of identical vehicles screeched to a stop, and men in suits jumped out, opening fire toward the rooftop. Shun didn't even bother shooting back. He turned his back on the storm of bullets and disappeared into the night. On the ground, a mysterious woman took command of the group, furious that they had just lost the most valuable target in the world. The injured sniper, bones shattered, warned them that the Lord was an untouchable demon. With the police already on the way, the criminals retreated quickly, while their leader worried about only one thing: how she would explain this complete failure to the real boss. The convoy sped away, unaware that danger was traveling with them. Su Shun was clinging beneath one of the vehicles. He had just infiltrated the serpent's nest. When they arrived at a large mansion, tension filled the air. The boss slammed his fist on the table in anger over the failed mission. The wounded assassin begged for one last chance, promising he would bring back the target's head. The leader gave him 3 days before leaving on his ship, ordering that the next attempt must succeed. Their strategy quickly changed. Now the order was to use Shun's girlfriend as bait. Hidden in the bushes outside, Su Shun heard everything. He recognized the man leading the operation, Callan Wilson, someone who had carried hatred for 7 years after losing a fortune and a few fingers to the previous Lord. To Shun, Callan was nothing more than an irrelevant ghost chasing an impossible revenge. Meanwhile, Ansi Jing was relaxing in bed when she received a late-night call. Shun unexpectedly invited her on a luxury cruise, and her eyes immediately lit up with excitement. The next morning, already settled in a 5-star hotel suite, she ran across the balcony, amazed by the view from the top floor and recording everything on her phone. Shun, seeing nothing special in the scenery, simply pulled her close and promised to take her anywhere in the world. After a quick kiss, Ansi started planning a day at the beach, but Shun was more focused on food. While she showered behind the glass bathroom wall, nearly making him lose his breath, he ordered a full banquet from room service. Between bites, he called to check on the company. Liu Yu confirmed that enemy agents were still wasting their time watching the empty office, completely unaware that their target was miles away enjoying life. The distraction plan was working perfectly. While assassins watched a decoy at the office in Arapongas, the real Su Shun was already far away, preparing his next move. Later, at the hotel restaurant, an unexpected guest tried to steal the spotlight. A woman named Janjuruo, whose beauty turned heads across the room, asked to share their table, claiming there were no seats available. Men everywhere stared at her in awe, even one guy who nearly got slapped by his girlfriend for not looking away. Shun acted like she didn't exist. Janjuruo, used to being the center of attention, assumed he was playing hard to get or simply too shy to look at her. The real shock came when Shun finished his meal and stood up without saying a word, leaving the fatal beauty sitting there alone. The only thing on his mind was whether there was a stain on his shirt, since the strange woman kept staring at him. Later, while walking along the harbor, the atmosphere turned even more extravagant. A crowd gathered along the windows to watch the arrival of the Golden Ray, one of the most expensive cruise ships in the world. The ship's golden shine reflected in Ansi Jing's eyes as she dreamed about boarding it. Shun smiled slightly. He knew that Callan Wilson's prized toy had finally come within his reach. The check-in area was chaotic, with excited passengers trying to take pictures near the massive ship. Ansi froze in amazement when Shun pulled her closer and suggested they go on board. For her, it felt like an impossible dream. For him, it was the start of an infiltration. Before stepping onto the deck, Shun quietly changed his appearance. The Lord had no intention of being recognized too early. Ansi could hardly believe they were about to board the ship. Tickets for the Golden Ray were usually sold out a year in advance. As they walked toward the boarding ramp, Su Shun accidentally bumped into an arrogant man. The man reacted angrily, but Shun simply smiled. In the blink of an eye, 2 VIP tickets appeared in Shun's hands. Ansi's eyes widened when she realized he had just stolen them. Shun quickly reassured her that the victim wasn't innocent. It was a gambler involved in money laundering. Satisfied with that explanation, she pulled him onto the ship, excited to begin the trip. Inside, the atmosphere felt strange. Shun quickly noticed the passengers looked far from ordinary. This wasn't a normal cruise. It was a private gathering for criminals and powerful figures from the underworld. He knew Wilson had to be somewhere nearby, and the confrontation was inevitable. Meanwhile, inside a luxurious suite, Callan Wilson angrily splashed wine across a subordinate's face, furious that the head of the Lord had not been delivered yet. The trembling man insisted the final ambush was already prepared for when the target returned home. Impatient, Wilson stood up with his cane. It was time to begin the main event in the grand hall. The main hall was packed. Ansi felt a chill run down her spine when she heard rumors that the place hosted a massive underground casino. She immediately wanted to leave, but Shun gently held her arm and assured her she was safe. In the corridor, he spotted Janjuruo again, the girl from the restaurant, standing alone and quietly observing everything with an unreadable expression. Suddenly, the lights shifted toward the stage. Callan Wilson stepped out to thunderous applause and cheers, welcoming his honored guests. Hidden in the crowd under his new disguise, Su-shun gave a cold smile. He knew Wilson was celebrating the last days of his life, and that the Golden Ray would become the stage for his downfall. Tension on the cruise ship grew stronger as the vessel approached international waters. While Ansi Jing looked curiously at the gambling tables, Su-shun explained that the low-stakes games were only a cover meant to stall for time. Wilson was a cautious target. He only appeared briefly and unpredictably, making it nearly impossible to locate him inside the luxurious maze of the ship. Across the hall, Janjuruo jumped excitedly every time she won at the table next to them. To Shun, she looked like nothing more than a wealthy heiress enjoying the thrill of gambling. But her unbelievable streak of luck soon began attracting dangerous attention. From his monitoring room, Wilson watched her through the security cameras. Ignoring the passenger list entirely, he made a simple decision. Any woman on his ship now belonged to him. The approach was blunt. Two men in suits interrupted her game with an invitation to have coffee with the boss. Janjuruo tried to refuse with a mocking tone, but the cold touch of a blade pressed against her thigh quickly changed the conversation. Even after attempting to use her social status as protection, she was dragged through the corridors under the watchful but silent eyes of Su-shun. Meanwhile, Wilson became uneasy about another figure on the surveillance screens. A young man wearing a hat seemed to be mocking the entire security system. No camera could clearly capture his face. It was as if he knew exactly where every blind spot was located. The security officer monitoring the footage began to sweat, realizing it wasn't luck, it was pure professionalism. Wilson felt danger creeping closer. The target he had hunted for so long was not only on the ship, but seemed to have an invisible guardian protecting his every move. Janjuru's cry for help echoed through the corridor, but on the Golden Ray, screams rarely led to rescue. Wilson's game was about to turn into a nightmare. While he dragged Janjuru toward his private suite, the girl sobbed and desperately offered money in exchange for her freedom. Su-shun watched everything from the shadows, calculating the perfect moment to act. Before he could move, a steel cable suddenly whipped toward him. A bodyguard attempted a cheap strike aimed at his pelvis, but Shun only smiled. With a quick motion, he grabbed the cable from the attacker's hands and knocked him down with humiliating ease. The guard lay on the floor, stunned and confused about how a simple security guard could move with such terrifying skill. By the time reinforcements arrived, Shun had already disappeared around the corner. When they found their fallen teammate, panic began spreading across the ship. A predator was loose on the Golden Ray. Inside Wilson's room, Janjuruo slowly backed toward the wall, trembling in fear. The old man approached with twisted promises of kindness, laughing at the girl's desperation. In a sudden act of resistance, she knocked over a vase. The crash of shattered glass brought the guards rushing to the door, but Wilson, irritated, ordered them to stay outside. He wanted to savor every second of her fear. What he didn't expect was the arrival of the Lord. Outside, Su-shun was already climbing the side of the ship like a phantom. Without hesitation, he smashed through the glass window and entered the luxurious suite like a demon. The shock froze Wilson for a brief second before he screamed for help. Too late. Shun's fist crashed into his face with full force. Blood exploded from Wilson's mouth, instantly wiping the villain's smile away. Outside the room, the sudden silence from the guards was the first sign of chaos. Inside, Callan Wilson was already sprawled across the floor, spitting out a tooth after the brutal punch. Janjuruo, still shaking, tried to see the face of her rescuer through the shadows. When Shun removed his glasses and revealed his face, she finally recognized the shy guy from the restaurant. Overcome with relief and gratitude, she threw herself into his arms, crying uncontrollably. The calm lasted only seconds. A voice suddenly echoed through the ship's speaker system. If Shun didn't surrender, Ansi Jing would be tortured. Outside on the deck, the situation had already turned critical. Ansi was surrounded by armed agents, being used as bait. When the elevator doors opened, the mercenaries aimed their weapons, ready to kill, but froze when they saw Wilson being held in front of Shun as a human shield. Shun carefully studied every movement. The game had changed. The leader of the agents, Johan, pressed the barrel of his gun against Ansi's temple, ignoring Wilson's desperate order to cease fire. It became painfully clear that loyalty on this ship had a price. The mercenaries openly admitted that Wilson's death would actually benefit them more. If he died, they would split his fortune among themselves. Wilson screamed in rage as he realized the men he had paid for years had betrayed him. Johann only smiled. Then he fired his boss with a bullet to the head. Gunfire erupted instantly afterward. Ansi Jing ran for cover behind a wall, screaming Shun's name while bullets tore through the corridor like a meat grinder. But Shun moved like a ghost. He quickly realized something important. The system still hadn't announced the completion of the mission. The real challenge had only just begun. Cornered and surrounded, Shun slowly pulled the knife from his belt, his eyes turning ice cold. Johann gave the final order. Every mercenary rushed forward at once to ensure the Lord would never leave the Golden Ray alive. Darkness became Sushun's greatest ally. The moment the attack began, he burst from the shadows and unleashed a storm of daggers that pierced the mercenaries' chests with surgical precision. One of the agents tried to retaliate with a machine gun. Shun instantly grabbed the body of a wounded officer and used him as a human shield while advancing forward without hesitation. Johann and Ansi Jing watched the scene in shock. Amid the chaos, Shun destroyed the hall's lanterns, plunging everything into complete darkness. Panic exploded instantly. George tried to regroup the men by shouting orders, but his voice became his death sentence. Guided by the sound, Shun appeared behind him and pressed a blade against his throat. The other agents, desperate and confused, ignored George's screams and opened fire at his position. Their frantic burst of gunfire killed their own teammate. One of the female mercenaries tried to avenge him, firing point blank at Shun, but he dodged every bullet with a mocking smile. With a quick motion, he slit her throat. For a brief moment, he almost sounded regretful, remarking that such beauty was wasted, since in his eyes no one could ever surpass Ansi Jing. Johann, cornered and terrified, tried to use Ansi as his final shield. But before he could finish his threat, a dagger flew through the air and knocked the gun from his hand. Johann's fear turned into pure horror when he realized Shun was already standing behind him. A cold whisper reached his ear. This was why he carried the title of Supreme Lord. To spare Ansi from the bloody scene, Shun gently covered her eyes with one hand. With the other, he swung his blade once. Johann's head fell in a single clean strike. Silence slowly returned to the deck. With the job finished, Shun finally let out a calm breath. The system confirmed the mission's success and immediately prompted a class transition. Without hesitation, he accepted his new identity for the week. Su Shun had now become an infallible seer, someone capable of seeing the future before it even happened. The new week began with a mystical twist. Now a seer, Su Shun possessed the ability to communicate with spirits and predict the future with absolute precision. The system gave him a clear objective. He had 7 days to become a living legend across the entire province. In return, a mysterious reward awaited him. While Shun tried to process the rules of this new game, Ansi Jing interrupted his thoughts. She asked why he was still covering her eyes. He slowly removed his hand, explaining that he didn't want her to see the bloodbath on the deck. With the calmness of someone who had just wiped out an army, Shun assured her that those men were nothing but trash, and that the danger was over. At the port, police sirens and flashing lights surrounded the cruise ship. Authorities had received an anonymous report about the illegal casino operating on board, and elite passengers were now being escorted out in panic. Shun introduced himself to the officers as the president of the Shinjun Corporation, revealing that he was the one who had reported Wilson's criminal empire. From a distance, Janjiruo watched the scene with mixed feelings of admiration and disappointment. She tried to thank him, but Shun cut her off coldly. He said he had only saved her by coincidence, and that traveling alone to a place like that had been extremely reckless. Without giving her another glance, he left with Ansi and returned to the hotel. Back in the room, the atmosphere shifted. Ansi, still shaken by the night's events, admitted she was afraid to sleep alone and needed someone by her side. Shun, completely focused on his new mission as a seer and missing her intention entirely, calmly suggested standing guard outside the door instead. The hint flew right past him. Ansi was left furious at his complete lack of awareness. The next morning, she woke up and found Shun sitting at the foot of the bed, waiting patiently for half an hour so they wouldn't miss their flight home. Her face turned red, confused about why he had been quietly watching her sleep for so long. The romantic mood of the morning didn't last long. With a mysterious smile, Su Shun made a teasing remark suggesting that the previous night hadn't been enough, promising to be more affectionate next time. Ansi blushed even deeper, unsure what he meant. Soon after, the scene changed completely. They arrived at the university, and after a goodbye kiss and a promise to meet again that night, Shun stepped into his new role. On the steps of the campus, the image of the corporate president vanished. In its place appeared a street fortune teller. Dressed the part, Shun set up his stall beside a veteran fortune teller who had been in the business for 30 years. The old master snorted in anger, convinced that the young newcomer was nothing more than a fraud who didn't even know how to properly trick people. Offended by Shun's claim that he possessed a real supernatural gift, the old man packed his things and stormed away. It didn't take long for the first customer to appear. A young couple walked down the steps while arguing about going to the movies. The girl immediately stopped when she noticed Shun's striking appearance. Ignoring her boyfriend's warnings about scammers, she eagerly extended her hand, curious to test the stranger's powers. The situation quickly grew tense. Her boyfriend, overflowing with jealousy and skepticism, grabbed her arm and challenged Shun directly. He threatened to break him if the prediction didn't come true. The old fortune teller, watching from afar, laughed at the trouble the rookie had gotten himself into. But Shun didn't back down. With absolute calm, he accepted the challenge and asked if the tough guy was really ready to face the consequences of the truth. The girl tried to avoid the conflict, but curiosity got the better of her. Laughing at Shun's supposed arrogance, the man demanded to know exactly what fate had in store for him in the next few minutes. The challenge had been set. To end the argument, Su Shun spoke plainly. He predicted that the man would bleed and be humiliated before the day was over. The guy burst out laughing. Mocking the prophecy, he bragged about being a black belt in Taekwondo and promised to return the next day to expose the lie. Sensing trouble, his girlfriend tried to pull him away. Fate didn't even take 5 minutes. While dragging the girl toward the cinema in anger, the hot-headed man accidentally bumped into a stranger on the street. Before he could react with his usual arrogance, he suddenly found himself surrounded. Liu and his gang appeared like shadows, trapping the couple. The so-called black belt didn't stand a chance. The beating was fast and precise. Not long after, the scene at the fortune-telling stall changed completely. The same man returned with a swollen face, his pride completely shattered. He dropped to his knees in front of Su Shun. Between sobs and desperate apologies, he begged for guidance, finally recognizing the genius standing before him. Shun remained composed. Before helping him, he demanded that the man admit his bad behavior first. Nearby, the old fortune-teller watched in stunned silence. Shun explained that he never read the future of the same person twice, but he made an exception for the girl. Curious and still blushing, Huang Jing, a second-year education student, asked about her financial future. After briefly analyzing her situation, Shun gave a clear answer. Good news about money would arrive any second now. The injured boyfriend's skepticism was suddenly interrupted by the sound of his phone ringing. It was the university director. He confirmed that Huang Jing had just been approved for a scholarship. Excitement exploded around the stall. Overwhelmed with joy, the girl grabbed Shun's hand and looked at him as if he were some all-powerful being. Within seconds, a crowd formed around the fortune-telling table, everyone desperate to hear a single word from the city's new seer. Shun simply watched the chaos with an unreadable expression. To maintain the aura of mystery, Su Shun quickly established a strict rule. He would only see 2 people per day. Then he quietly left the scene under the hungry stares of the crowd, fully aware that public curiosity would do all the marketing for him. Back at the office, a new notification from the system changed the rules of the game. Now, whenever he touched an object, he could access its memories, even its soul. He decided to test it immediately. The first subject was a decorative plant. The moment his palm touched one of its leaves, a flood of visions dragged him into its perspective. He saw the daily life of the office through the plant's existence, every quiet moment, even the times when Liu silently watered it. The experience was overwhelming. When Shun pulled his hand away, he was sweating cold. The potential of the ability was frightening. He realized he could uncover the hidden secrets of anyone. That thought alone was dangerous. Before temptation could sink in, his phone vibrated again. It was a message from Auntie Jing. She invited him to lunch with an uncle who had just returned from overseas. What sounded like a casual meal quickly turned into an official introduction to the family. At the table, the mood was cheerful. The relatives praised Auntie for maturing and congratulated her on finding such a handsome boyfriend. They even asked Shun to take good care of her. The peace didn't last long. Auntie's cousin, Unjuyu, and her boyfriend Liua soon joined the conversation. Trying to show off, Liua suggested they exchange contacts so he could help grow Shun's business, speaking with a condescending tone that immediately rubbed everyone the wrong way. When asked what he did for a living, Shun answered humbly that he ran a small business. Liua smirked. Running a hand through his hair with obvious arrogance, he bragged about working for the powerful Qinyun International Corporation and offered to help the poor guy. He had absolutely no idea he was offering a job to the owner of the very company where he worked. The family lunch took an even stranger turn when Su Shun accepted Liua's handshake. The moment their palms touched, the memory-reading ability activated, and the visions were ugly. Shun saw Liua's dark past unfold in seconds. The man had staged a fake, heroic rescue of a girl just to gain her parents' trust. Behind the scenes, he hid embarrassing medical secrets and shady dealings with men in expensive suits. The images made Shun feel sick. What disturbed him even more was discovering Liua's twisted fantasies, ones that involved not only his own fiancée, Anjuyu, but also Ansi Jing. Shun decided the man deserved a public humiliation. Pretending he had forgotten his phone, he casually asked to borrow Liua's device. Overflowing with arrogance, Liua handed it over without hesitation and even proudly recited the password. That was his fatal mistake. With a few quick movements, Shun accessed the hidden folders on the phone. Seconds later, the giant screen in the room displayed Liua's very unconventional hobbies with other men. The shock was instant. Ansi turned her face away in embarrassment, while Anjuyu's parents burned with rage after seeing the true face of their future son-in-law. Liua stood frozen, unable to understand how Shun had cracked the encryption protecting his most private secrets. Humiliated and exposed, Liua completely lost control. With a furious roar, he grabbed the heavy dining table with both hands and hurled it toward Ansi and her mother. Shun moved instantly. With a devastating reflex, he kicked the table mid-air. The wood shattered in half. The broken pieces flew back toward Liua, smashing into him and knocking the fraud unconscious in front of the horrified family. His entire lie collapsed in blood and shame. Pinned against the wall after Shun's counterattack, Liua trembled as his secrets continued pouring out. His staged rescue of Anjuyu, the medical records he tried to hide, everything. Yu snapped. Realizing she had been nothing more than a pawn in his schemes, she grabbed a knife and chased him out of the house in tears and screams. When the chaos finally settled, the room was filled with uneasy questions. Ansi's father, although relieved to be rid of such a terrible future son-in-law, couldn't understand how Shun knew such intimate details about someone who had just arrived from overseas. Shun tried to explain. He told them he was a visionary. The confession earned him a piece of paper thrown at the back of his head. Ansi wasn't in the mood for mystical nonsense. She ordered him to stop talking nonsense and finish his food. Later, when Shun left the house, he sensed something strange. Someone was following him. He quietly turned the corner, only to find Anjuyu standing there, pale and nervous. Gone was the arrogance she had shown earlier. Now she was desperate. She begged for his help. She needed the services of a seer to cleanse her new home from an evil presence that had been haunting her. By late afternoon, they arrived at the isolated cabin where her family had recently settled after returning to the country. Yu looked terrified. Since the second night in the house, strange noises and mournful crying near the windows had kept her awake. She described the moment when she tried to close the curtains to block the wind, and the fabric suddenly shaped itself into the silhouette of a person standing behind it, as if something invisible were waiting to be invited inside. Her fear was real. Every time she noticed the shape, it vanished instantly. Determined to solve the mystery, she brought Su Shun to the bedroom and pointed at the heavy curtains. Shun approached cautiously. When he touched the fabric, he activated his medium ability. The world changed instantly. Floating lights, like spiritual embers, filled the room, forming a trail that led directly toward the dense forest behind the cabin. Even for someone like Shun, the clarity of the supernatural trace sent a cold sweat down his face. Outside, Yu locked herself inside the car and called her mother for comfort, but she trusted that the seer would handle the situation. Shun stepped into the yard. The air around him suddenly turned freezing cold. A violent shiver ran down his spine when he realized something horrifying. The silhouette wasn't in front of him anymore. It was behind him. He spun around instantly, holding a spiritual talisman and ready to strike. But he froze the moment he heard a scream. Not supernatural. A scream filled with pure human terror. It wasn't a monster. It was the spirit of a young girl. The shock made Shun lose his balance and fall backward, immediately realizing a major flaw in his new power. He could see a soul, but he couldn't physically touch it. At least, that's what he thought. The ghost girl, surprised that someone could actually see her, approached him with curiosity. Instead of trying to possess him, she simply reached out and held his hand. The moment their hands touched, something impossible happened. Her spirit became solid. From the safety of the car nearby, Yu watched the scene unfold. From her perspective, Shun looked like he was fighting thin air, waving his arms at nothing. Terrified, she quickly reversed the car and sped away, silently apologizing to her cousin in her mind. Left alone with the spirit, Shun grabbed the girl by the back of the neck, surprised to feel the real texture of her spiritual form. He wasn't letting her go. not until she explained why she had been haunting the family and what pain was keeping her bound to that cabin. The spirit finally spoke. Her name was Chinchu. Her death had not been an accident. She had fallen from a cliff. She explained that she wandered around the cabin simply because she had nowhere else to go, and because she believed no one could ever see her. Moved by her story, Sushun made her an offer. He would take her with him. He promised her a place to stay, and more importantly, the chance to settle the score with the person who pushed her into the abyss. Chinchu broke down in tears as the memories of the betrayal came rushing back. When they arrived at her new temporary shelter, Shun laid down a simple rule: no floating around the streets and scaring the neighbors. Still, the adjustment turned out to be unusual. In the middle of the night, Shun suddenly woke up. The ghost was clinging tightly to his arm. Even though she was dead, Chinchu confessed she was terrified of sleeping alone in unfamiliar places. Not knowing how to deal with that level of spiritual clinginess, Shun eventually gave up. Soon enough, the haunting spirit was snoring heavily while sleeping on his chest. The next morning, the hunt began. Following the directions Chinchu gave him, they arrived at a wealthy neighborhood. The truth hit like a punch to the stomach. The murderer was Chinchu's best friend. The reason was painfully trivial. They had both fallen for the same man. Chinchu had never been able to take revenge because the traitor wore a powerful amulet, a mystical charm that blocked any spiritual approach. Standing in front of the woman's enormous mansion, Shun pressed the doorbell with a cold smile. Chinchu, still unsure how they would bypass the amulet's protection, asked what his plan was. Shun simply told her to trust him. As a seer, and now the partner of a spirit, he had a plan that would turn that woman's life into a nightmare. The entrance was pure chaos. Without asking permission, Sushun ignored the housekeeper's protests and walked straight into the mansion as if he owned the place. The owner of the house stormed down the stairs in fury, grabbing a chair and threatening to call the police to throw the intruder out. Shun didn't even blink. He knew fear would be his greatest weapon. To prove he wasn't just some random trespasser, he got a little invisible help. Chinchu made a bottle float across the room all by itself. It stopped right in front of the couple. Their jaws dropped. Terrified by the clear display of a poltergeist, their bravado vanished instantly. They sat down on the couch, stammering apologies and begging to know what was happening. Shun cast the bait. He claimed the house had been marked by a blood spirit and that the family would be destroyed by a deadly curse within 3 days. Panic spread immediately. The man dropped to his knees, willing to offer any fortune just to survive. When Shun asked who else lived in the house, the father desperately called for his daughter. Xiao Xiao! The girl came down the stairs complaining about a severe headache, a clear sign of the spiritual presence surrounding her. When she saw her parents kneeling on the floor, she froze. At the top of the stairs, Chinchu instantly recognized the face of the traitor. Memories of the day at the cliff came crashing back like a hammer. Consumed by rage and ignoring the amulet that blocked her, the victim's spirit rushed forward, ready to turn her best friend's life into a nightmare. The tension in the room reached its limit. Blinded by hatred, Chinchu lunged forward to strangle Xiao Xiao, but the amulet around the killer's neck reacted instantly. A mystical barrier flared with light, violently repelling the ghost and tearing her spiritual clothes apart. Sushun watched the invisible clash unfold and felt the energy recoil through the air. Blood suddenly ran from his nose. The sight sent Xiao Xiao's parents into complete panic. To them, it looked like the master was already locked in a deadly battle against a demon. Shun wiped the blood from his nose and ordered Chinchu to calm down. The ghost girl sobbed in frustration, unable to break through the barrier. To the terrified family, it looked as if Shun was fighting an invisible force. Then he played his final card. He declared that the blood curse haunting the house was entirely Xiao Xiao's fault. Those words reignited Chinchu's vengeful fury. The shock paralyzed Xiao Xiao. The moment she heard Chinchu's name, her entire body began to tremble. Her past crime had finally come back to collect its debt. The family's mask shattered. Desperate to protect his wealth and reputation, the father finally confessed the truth. Years ago, his daughter had pushed her best friend off a cliff. The reason was the oldest tragedy in the book. Both girls loved the same man, but he only had eyes for Chinchu. On that mountain, jealousy turned into murder. Even after being exposed, Xiao Xiao snapped, screaming that she had been the rightful choice and that Chinchu had only been an obstacle. Her father finally lost patience. With a furious slap across her face, he silenced her. To him, remorse didn't matter, only survival did. Watching the rot inside that family, Shun spoke coldly. Instead of wasting time arguing, they should discuss the real question. How exactly were they planning to pay to have that blood cleansed? Shinsu realized there was no salvation for someone who was already dead, and that the focus now was protecting the living. Susan explained that the spirit had not killed them all over the past 3 years because of the amulet the father had bought from a monk in Junling, but the amulet was losing its power. Susan warned that the spiritual protection was at its limit and offered to take the object and study it, receiving the family's approval. The atmosphere grew heavy when he gave the ultimatum. The victim's soul had become a bloodthirsty evil spirit, and the only way to stop the curse was for Yao to turn herself in to the police. Only human justice would bring peace to the house. Despair took over. The father tried to bribe Susun with a fortune, but the master would not be bought. When Susun threatened to leave and abandon them to their fate, the man threw himself on the floor, begging on his knees and grabbing his leg. Yao lost control. She refused to accept prison and began insulting the master, underestimating the danger. To keep her from making things worse with the spirit, the father forcibly gagged her. The girl still tried to appeal to her mother's emotions, talking about her younger brother's future, but she was pushed away with contempt. She tried to run, but her father restrained her in an iron grip. The weight of the family's survival was greater than his love for her. In the end, sirens cut through the silence of the mansion. It was the father himself who reported the murder that had happened 3 years earlier. As Yao was taken away, the mother tried to justify herself, asking her daughter not to hate them for their choice. The betrayal came from within. Cornered, Yao snapped and decided to drag her parents into the abyss with her, shouting that they had been accomplices during the 3 years of deception. The father, in pure cynicism, laughed in her face and denied any involvement. In the middle of the chaos, the police did not know who to believe, until Susan solved the mystery. He handed the officers a recorder containing all the evidence of the confession and the cover-up. That was when the father realized the trap. That fortune teller had not been there to save them, but to guarantee Shinchu's revenge. The family understood too late that they had just made a deal with the devil himself. Handcuffed and escorted under the grateful eyes of the officers, the three were taken away from the mansion. Mission accomplished. Susun looked at the ghost girl. Her hatred had evaporated, leaving only a strange emptiness. He then lightly pulled her cheek and proposed a new deal. She would now be his official assistant, a kind of spiritual mascot. Shinchu agreed immediately, sealing her loyalty by calling him Master. In a burst of gratitude, she even tried something bolder to please him, but Susun immediately cut it off, focused on the job. The rest did not last long. Susun's phone rang with Lihu on the other side, tense. A journalist was attacking Susun's reputation, calling him a fraud after seeing him telling fortunes on the street and promising a harsh expose. Susun simply smiled. The bait had worked perfectly. He called his new ghostly partner and set off for the next target. On the street, the investigative reporter was already shouting to anyone who would listen that the fortune teller was nothing but a fake. The show was just beginning. The circus was now live on TV. While the journalist tried to expose the fortune teller to a record-breaking audience, donations and comments kept rising. No one believed in someone so young. To the crowd, Susun was just another fraud chasing fame. Remaining calm like someone who controlled the game, Susun sat in his usual position and opened the session. The journalist, trying to corner the master, demanded a real test. Susun offered predictions about wealth or personal life, but the reporter was clever. He asked him to talk about the past, something that had already happened and could not be invented. Little did he know that for Susun, the past is an open book. All it took was a touch on the journalist's palm for the memories to surface. The fortune teller started lightly, exposing that the guy wet the bed until quite late and was a master at cheating on school exams. The man tried to keep his composure, but things heated up when Susun mentioned his romantic rejections and the reporter's dirty habit of peeking under girls' skirts. Feeling the hit, the journalist tried to discredit him, saying his name, Li Yang, and his parents' professions were public information. He wanted something sensational. Susun pretended to feel momentarily uncomfortable, which only boosted the reporter's confidence, pushing the fortune teller to continue under the pressure of the audience. That's when the hammer dropped. With an ironic smile, Susun revealed the filthiest secrets, details about wearing diapers until he was 13, and the existence of a secret folder on his computer, protected by a password, filled with photos of women taken without their consent. Panic was instant. The journalist jumped back, pale, not knowing whether he was facing a man or a demon. Susun simply replied that demons do not walk under the sun. While the entire nation watched that public humiliation in shock, the fortune teller gave one last piece of advice, a daily horoscope, warning the man to be very careful about what would happen next. The journalist left shaken, trying to convince himself it was all just a bizarre coincidence. But fate, or rather, Shinchu, had other plans. With an invisible move, the ghost knocked him down with full force. He slammed face first onto the ground right in front of the crowd, serving as living proof. The fortune teller's words were law. The crowd went wild, rushing forward to get a reading, forcing Susan to organize a line to handle the chaos. Meanwhile, in a beach house, the mood was like a funeral. Yuru lay collapsed on the bed, ignoring the maid's pleas for her to eat something. The girl only had eyes for her phone until an article about the fortune teller appeared on the screen. She recognized Susan's face immediately and felt that he was her last hope. In the office, the atmosphere was strange. Outside, the bodyguards exchanged confused looks, hearing odd noises coming from inside without understanding anything. One of the men even thought the boss was losing control, while Liu complained about the heavy stress Susan carried. The truth was far calmer. Shinchu was giving the master a relaxing massage. While taking care of him, the ghost asked why he wasted time predicting the lives of strangers if he would have to carry the burden of the future alone. Susun agreed and decided to limit his readings to only 3 people per day. He monitored social media and saw his name exploding, but the system had not yet marked the mission as complete. He needed more fame, something grand. The silence was broken by Liu, who burst into the room urgently. Master Shou, an influential figure, had just issued a public challenge to expose Susan the next day. The fortune teller simply listened, knowing that this was exactly the stage he needed to solidify his empire. The opponent's name was Ming Chenghai, a major figure in metaphysics and a master of face reading. According to Leah, the man was the best in the province and had enough influence to bury Susan's reputation. The warning was clear. He was dangerous. Susan, however, saw it as the missing step to the top. Instead of running, he decided to face the challenge to make his name echo once and for all. Leah suggested a disguise to avoid damaging the company's image, but Susun already had his own plan and dismissed her. Before leaving, Shinchu, the ghost, decided to cause trouble. She suddenly lifted Leah's skirt. The assistant, thinking the harassment came from Susun, panicked in embarrassment. The master swore he was innocent, but the guards outside only heard the shouting and slaps and decided it was better not to get involved in the boss's relationship drama. The next morning, the stage was set. Susun waited for his rival, while Shinchu tried to read the master's mood. She wanted attention, but was completely ignored. Then the crowd went wild. Master Shou arrived in style, stepping out of a luxury car to loud applause. He walked arrogantly, surrounded by bodyguards, ready to humiliate the newcomer and show who ruled the spiritual world. But the fall was literal. When Master Shou approached to intimidate Susun, Shinchu gave him a precise shove in the back. The great master kissed the ground in front of everyone. Susun could not help laughing, commenting that the demigod did not even watch where he was walking. Furious and with his ego wounded, Master Shou stood up wanting blood. One of his bodyguards growled that Susun was playing with fire by deceiving people. The tension rose, and the final challenge was issued by the veteran, a fortune-telling duel. They would read each other's fate right there, in front of everyone, to decide who was the real master and who was the fraud. The challenge was accepted. Susun went straight to the point and asked the rival to explain the origin of a scar on his arm. The audience thought the task was impossible, but the atmosphere changed completely when Susun grabbed Master Shou's hand, a gesture that looked like an ironic marriage proposal, leaving everyone in shock. While the veteran's associates trembled, Susun delivered the prediction. At 3 years old, Master Shou had cut himself with an axe while gathering firewood in the forest. The rival's face turned pale. Sweat ran down his face as he desperately tried to keep his composure, lying that the wound was recent and came from a kitchen accident. He called Susun an imposter, but his nervousness was obvious. Trying to turn the tables, Master Shou offered a reading in return, promising to predict the date of the young man's future marriage. He demanded to see Susun's palm and asked for his date of birth. Susun gave the information with an irritating calm. The shock was immediate. As he analyzed the data, Master Shou froze. He stepped back as if he had seen a ghost, and fear spread across his face. Without anyone understanding what was happening, the renowned master bowed deeply, loudly asking for forgiveness for not recognizing Susun's greatness. The crowd could not believe what they saw, the province's favorite admitting defeat before the competition had even ended. Susun, confused, demanded to know what had caused so much terror in his opponent, but Master Shou could only shout that he had lost, avoiding any explanation. Master Shou's panic was complete. He seemed to have seen the end of the world in Susun's data and, trembling with fear, swore he would take that secret to the grave. Without giving any explanation, the veteran simply ran away, leaving the audience in absolute silence. The pressure fell on Susun. Everyone stared at him as if he were a god, begging for consultations and miraculous solutions. Seeing the situation about to spiral out of control, he did not think twice. He jumped and got out of there. For him, the mission of gaining fame on the streets had already hit its peak. He no longer needed to expose himself like that. Shinchu, the ghost, found her master's desperate escape amusing, but the peace did not last long. A familiar voice called Susun from behind, startling him. It was Yuruo. Smiling, she approached and asked for help locating a specific person. Susun tried to maintain his cover and asked for her birth details for the reading, but the girl simply blushed and pulled a piece of paper from behind her back. It was a drawing of Susun himself. She had found him by following clues on social media and proved that female intuition was faster than any algorithm. Surprised that he was working as a fortune teller, she heard from him that it was just a hobby, the real reason for her visit. Yuruo wanted to thank him for saving her life on the ship. The conversation stalled. Yuruo stuttered nervously, while the ghost Shinchu was already losing patience with the sweet atmosphere. The bomb dropped when the girl asked if he had a girlfriend. Susun, straight to the point, said he was committed to the girl who had accompanied him on the cruise. He handed her a business card to end the conversation, but Yuruo did not take the rejection well. Irritated and persistent, she began firing questions at Susun about the relationship, trying to find an opening. If he was not engaged, in her mind, the competition was still open. Yuruo left bouncing with determination, unwilling to give up, leaving Shinchu with a sharp judgment written across her face. Susun chose to ignore the awkwardness and suggested lunch, but something bothered him. If he had already defeated Master Show, why had the system not marked the mission as complete yet? Something bigger was coming. Far away, in the Hang family mansion, the desperation of an heir spoke louder. The young man threw himself at a monk's feet, begging for justice. According to him, Susun was a dangerous fraud who was keeping his parents and sister trapped after using Shinchu's spirit to terrorize them. The monk listened carefully. The young man explained that Susun was just a mediocre schoolmate who had suddenly become a powerful CEO and fortune teller, an impossible rise without dark forces. The monk connected the dots. The so-called Master Su trending on the internet and the tormentor of the Hang family were the same person. His interest was awakened. Taming a vengeful spirit would be the perfect glory. He ordered to be taken to Susun's location immediately. Meanwhile, peace reigned on the beach. Susun tried to fish under Jing's skeptical gaze, who doubted his patience for the sport. But the calm was broken when he spotted very different fish approaching. It was Huang Teng, the furious heir, bringing the monk with him. The young man was blinded by rage, accusing Susun of stealing his girlfriend and destroying his family. The monk wasted no time and activated his spiritual vision. At that moment, Shinchu sensed the danger. She had not expected Yao to have a brother, much less that he would bring someone capable of seeing her. Susun smiled slightly when he saw who had arrived. The true boss of the stage had finally appeared. It was time to complete the mission by facing the Taoist master head-on. Shinchu, cornered for the first time, shrank behind Susun, feeling the monk's gaze pierce her soul. The final confrontation began with a clash of realities. Susun showed the monk the amulet Yao used, but the Taoist master scoffed, calling the object trash. To prove his power, the monk opened a spiritual vortex that began pulling Shinchu in. Desperate, the ghost girl cried for help, and Susun grabbed her arm, preventing her from being dragged away. Jing watched everything without understanding anything, feeling only a chill while the invisible forces fought. The monk, full of moralism, accused Susun of using his gifts for sinister purposes. As he prepared to cast a final spell, he heard the metallic click of a weapon being cocked behind his neck. Li Hu and his guards had surrounded the area. Susun delivered checkmate. In the real world, the lead of a bullet is faster than any mantra. Frightened, the monk shrank back and asked for forgiveness. Wang Teng, who had watched everything, went into shock seeing his powerful master bend before a pistol. With no way out, the Hang family heir fell to his knees and tried to apologize, but he was ignored by Ziyin. By Susun's order, Liu dragged him away by the hair to hand him over to the police. It was time for him to pay for covering up his sister's crimes. With the field clear, Susun forced the monk into a civilized conversation. The master, now overly humble, admitted that his abilities were pathetic compared to what Susun had shown. The young man confessed that until 2 weeks ago he did not even believe in ghosts, but his recent journey had made him curious about something greater, immortality. The monk almost laughed, thinking Susun had been reading too much fiction. He explained that there were no immortals. Taoism was practice, discipline, and often just tricks to impress the public. Susun listened in silence, trying to process whether that was truly the limit of that world or if the monk simply had not reached the next level. The monk still argued that Shinchu needed to be taken for study, but the ghost simply stuck her tongue out at him. The Taoist master was intrigued. For a spirit, her form was far too clear, even defying sunlight. Afraid of becoming a test subject, Shinchu began to cry and hugged Susun's legs, begging to stay. He, of course, was not going to discard his favorite mascot. Meanwhile, Jing watched the scene with her arms crossed, boiling with jealousy at the interaction. Susun noticed the mood and decided to end the discussion with the monk. The master could not believe he would leave unharmed, but Susun went beyond generosity. He proposed that they become allies. The monk broke into tears, complaining that the life of a Taoist was hard and poorly paid. When Susun offered $1 million for him to help the other monks at the temple, the man nearly collapsed and promised to build a statue in Susun's honor. To calm Jing, Susun gave her a gentle kiss on the cheek and assured her that Shinchu was just a spirit, nothing to worry about. Jing then showed her phone. The disciple of the legendary King of Cuisine, Chen Fan, had returned to the city at an extremely expensive and highly sought-after 5-star restaurant. Susun was intrigued and decided that would be dinner for the night. When they arrived, they found a massive line wrapping around the block. Shinchu stayed in the car while the two tried their luck. Jing doubted they would get in, but Susun simply smiled and started cutting the line. He stopped in front of a couple who had been there since early and offered money for their spot. The couple tried to act tough at first, but when Susun showed the amount on the check, their attitude changed instantly. With their eyes shining at all those zeros, they practically pushed Susun and Jing into the restaurant, wishing them a good meal while leaving laughing at their good fortune. At the back of the line, other women started arguing with their boyfriends for not having the same luck of being bribed. Seated at the table, Jing was still a little tense about how they had cut the line, but Susun acted as if nothing had happened. At that moment, the system chimed. Task completed. As a reward, he unlocked a permanent intermediate ability and a mysterious gift. When Susun opened the bonus, he received a 300% upgrade to his charm. He looked at his reflection in a glass and saw no physical change, but the effect was immediate. Jing, red as a pepper, confessed to a sudden and overwhelming attraction, even teasing him under the table. Susun realized he had become a human magnet, which would be very useful for his plans. The waiter arrived, and Susun ordered the tasting menu, commenting that he needed energy for the physical activity later that night, leaving Jing even more embarrassed. But the game changed when the system updated his identity for the week. He was now the King of Cuisine, a legendary chef, master of global techniques and culinary sculptures, who had disappeared after defeating the best. The new mission was clear: create a world-famous restaurant in just 30 days. As the food was served, Jing enjoyed it, thinking everything was perfect. For Susun, however, the flavor was mediocre. With his new chef instincts, he thought Chen Fan's food was a bad joke, calling the man a puppy for tarnishing the master's legacy. On the restaurant balcony, the chef Chen Fan watched the crowd while being flattered by the manager, who swore he would soon surpass his master and become the new king. Chen Fan, with arrogance disguised as modesty, accepted the praise. But something at Susun's table caught his attention, and his confidence was about to collapse. Susun did not hesitate. After one bite, he spat the food into the trash with a disgusted expression that froze the restaurant. The gesture enraged the customers, who thought everything was wonderful, and it drew Chen Fan's attention. The chef appeared on the balcony, mocking the attitude and asking the manager to ban country bumpkins, who did not know how to appreciate fine dining. Laughing at the cynicism, Susun stopped him before he could leave. He fired back that the food was mediocre and that the chef was careless. The audience was shocked, but Susun continued the lecture. The presentation of the dishes was poor, the seasoning combinations were not worth a cent, and charging outrageous prices for that was robbery. The manager tried to defend the restaurant, claiming everyone loved the menu, but Susun exposed the marketing. He explained that people ate with their eyes, fooled by beautiful presentation and the place's status. As he spoke, the customers began to realize that the flavor did not justify the price. Cornered, Chen Fan resorted to his resume, shouting that he was a disciple of the legendary King of Cuisine. It was the fatal mistake. With the memories of his new identity loaded, Susun revealed the fraud. Chen Fan had never been anyone's student. He had merely crossed paths with the real master in a hotel hallway and invented the rest to gain fame. Panic spread. The manager and the chef shouted that it was a lie and threatened to call the police for defamation, but Susan ended the matter with an enigmatic smile, declaring himself the true king of cuisine. The announcement froze the entire place. Jing and the guests were left speechless, while Chen Fan nearly fainted, realizing that his years-long deception had just been destroyed by someone who truly understood the craft. The manager still tried to maintain the lie, but the cold sweat and Chen Fan's silence gave everything away. The fraud was in shock. He had never imagined the real king of cuisine would appear in his restaurant. Even though he had never seen the master's face, the details Susan revealed about the secret meeting at the hotel were impossible to ignore. Desperate to save his career, Chen Fan decided to double down and keep lying, claiming that his master's face was a closely guarded secret. The crowd, already smelling fraud in the air, proposed a cooking duel right there. Cornered, Chen Fan tried to avoid the challenge, using the excuse that he would not cook for just anyone. Susan did not waste time with empty arguments. He delivered checkmate. He would open his own restaurant the next day and invited everyone present and the online audience to taste the difference. Meanwhile, at the company headquarters, the atmosphere was uncertain. Leah was furious about President Su's disappearance, thinking he had abandoned the business. Mr. Lee, however, revealed that after a recent conversation, he realized the boss was operating on another level, thinking about the long-term future and refusing to become a slave to the routine of the office. Leah's phone vibrated. It was Susan, ordering her to go immediately to a specific address. She rushed out, believing he was finally focused on a monumental project. When she arrived, the shock was inevitable. Susan was wearing a chef's apron in front of his new establishment, the King of Cuisine's refuge. Leah sighed, feeling foolish for expecting something corporate, while Susan simply explained that the restaurant was in its final preparations. Since she did not know how to fry an egg, Susan decided that Leah and Jing would be the waitresses. He dressed them in modern, eye-catching uniforms, assigning them to handle the customers while he took full command of the kitchen to show the world who truly ruled flavor. The dining room was being prepared at full speed. Jing could not hide her indignation. She could not understand how the president of a large corporation was forcing his own team to serve tables. Susan, as calm as ever, explained that the position was already open, but for the grand opening, he needed their trust. The peace did not last long. Right at the entrance, a group of rough-looking men showed up asking for the owner. They were collectors of the area's protection fee, ready to extort the new business. Jing was about to reach for her phone to call security, but Susun stopped her. He did not want to scare away customers, even if they were criminals. With a challenging smile, Susun invited them to sit down. The thugs demanded immediate payment so they would not smash the place, but the master proposed a deal. They would taste the food first. If it was not the best thing they had ever eaten, he would pay double the fee. The gang leader, although suspicious of a trap, accepted, more interested in staring at the waitresses than the menu. While Leah trembled nervously and thought about calling for backup, she decided to peek into the kitchen. What she saw was a spectacle. Susun controlled the flames with incredible skill while Shinchu floated around helping with the ingredients. In a choreographed move, he tossed a fish into the air and sliced it with surgical precision before it even touched the cutting board, separating meat and bone in seconds. Leah could barely process that her boss was a prodigy with knives. The atmosphere in the dining room grew tense because of the delay, and the thugs were already losing patience. Then Susan emerged from the kitchen, followed by the waitresses carrying steaming trays. He apologized with irony, saying he was rusty and needed a warm-up. The gang leader was about to complain, but the aroma that filled the room stopped him mid-sentence. The smell was hypnotic. As soon as the plates touched the table, their tough guy attitude collapsed. While the boss still tried to keep up appearances and demand the money, his henchmen lunged at the food like starving animals, completely forgetting the extortion. Susun and the girls watched everything as crime was defeated by appetite. The thugs lost all composure, fighting over every piece of food until the plates were shining, looking brand new from how clean they were. The girls watched in shock, joking that even a dishwasher would not do such a good job. Full and satisfied, the brutes almost forgot why they were there. They tried to invent some flaw in the food to keep the extortion going, but they could not. The defeat was humiliating. They began to cry, admitting that lying about such a divine flavor would be a sin. They paid a huge bill and left the restaurant defeated by taste. Soon after, a familiar voice appeared. Yuruo showed up responding to the ad, determined to take the waitress position. While the King of Cuisine's refuge came to life, Chen Fan's rival restaurant collapsed. The manager, furious at seeing the dining room empty, demanded his investment back, accusing Chen of being a fraud who could not even recognize his own master. Blinded by rage and watching his empire fall apart, Chen Fan stabbed a knife into Susan's photo, swearing to destroy him the next day. For him, it no longer mattered who the real king was. He just wanted to wipe out the competition. The next morning, the sidewalk outside Susun's place was packed. The buzz on the internet was insane. When the doors finally opened, the crowd went wild seeing the trio of waitresses, Jing, Leah, and Yuruo, welcoming everyone. The customers, hypnotized by their beauty and the aroma from the kitchen, filled the dining room in seconds. Inside, the pace was frantic. Orders and receipts kept pouring out of the machine. In the kitchen, Susun worked like a machine, moving so fast that Shinshu could barely keep up with the flood of orders. Even the wealthy Yuruo was sweating to keep up with the work. After an exhausting day of record-breaking revenue, the team finally sat down to rest, waiting only for the last customer at table 1 to finish his meal. The last customer left in a strange way, leaving a generous tip with Yuruo, but Susun felt that the man was carrying something heavy. The feeling was confirmed the next morning. Before the sun had even risen, a crowd was already banging on the doors, but not to eat. Amid the shouting, police sirens cut through the air. An officer announced the immediate closure and sealing of the restaurant. Leah rushed into the back in panic, but found Susun strangely calm, as if he had expected the blow since the night before. Outside, reporters surrounded the place, ready to record the fall of the new culinary phenomenon. Susun walked out to face the cameras and the authorities. When the officer demanded a confession, Chen Fan appeared among the reporters with a victorious smile. He himself had guided the police there, determined to prove that the master was a fraud. Chen Fan ignored the crowd's protests, defending the food's quality, and went straight to the point. He pointed to the kitchen and reported the existence of a bag of forbidden spices. The search order was given. The atmosphere grew tense as officers rummaged through the stock. Chen Fan was already savoring victory, certain they would find illegal substances explaining the customer's addiction to the food. However, the officer returned only with an ordinary bag of seasoning, and completely empty. Shock froze Chen Fan. He snatched the bag from the officer's hands, inspecting every seam frantically, unable to believe his trap had vanished. Susun, watching the disciple's desperation, asked ironically what exactly he expected to find there. The officer, already losing patience with the chaos, began explaining that Chen Fan's accusation was about to become a crime of filing a false report. The accusation was serious. Chen Fan claimed Susun was addicting customers by using poppy seeds in the food. But the plan backfired. Nervous for not finding anything, the fraud was certain the master had hidden the product. Playing along, Susun decided to turn the attack into a spectacle and invited the reporters to come inside and film every corner of the kitchen live. The search was thorough. Press and police went through everything, but the result was the same: absolute cleanliness. Watching from a distance, Yuruo could not understand how Susun was so calm until he hinted about the high-definition security cameras monitoring the place. Chen Fan ended the search collapsed on the floor, exhausted and in shock, muttering about where the drugs could have gone. Susun only looked at him with contempt, denying any knowledge about the matter. The police had no choice. Chen Fan was detained on the spot for false testimony, but Susun was not satisfied. Before the officers left, he made a counter-accusation, suggesting that if Chen Fan knew that scheme so well, maybe the culprit was the accuser himself. Even without immediate proof, Susun challenged the police to search the rival restaurant, taking responsibility if nothing was found. Chen Fan, laughing nervously, accepted the bet, swearing his kitchen was spotless. When they arrived at the luxury restaurant, the fraud's confidence was unshakable. The officer allowed Susun to inspect the place. While Chen Fan mocked him, calling it cheap revenge, Susun began searching the cabinets with the look of someone who already knew the outcome. Suddenly, he stopped in front of a shelf and pulled out a strange object that would make Chen Fan's smile disappear forever. The outcome was fatal. Susun pulled out a dried poppy flower from one of the corners, leaving Chen Fan in shock. The fraud tried to shout that it was a trap and that Susun had planted the evidence, but the officer ignored him and ordered a full search. The search led to a safe in the upper cabinets. Chen Fan, with suicidal arrogance, decided to open it to prove it only held his culinary secrets. He believed no one else knew the password, ignoring that for a master like Susun, and with the invisible help of Shinshu, secrets did not exist. When he opened the door, the shelf revealed a bag stuffed with poppies. The chef was handcuffed immediately. With that quantity, the expected sentence was life in prison. His screams accusing Susun were drowned out by police logic. The safe was personal and secure. Only he could have put that there. Outside, the scene looked like a movie. Reporters surrounded Susun, bombarding him with questions about his secret identity and how he balanced being a company president with haute cuisine. With a charisma that now seemed hypnotic, he summed it all up as a simple hobby and walked away, leaving a legion of new fans sighing. In the middle of the chaos, an official car blocked his path. Representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs appeared with an urgent invitation. They wanted him to prepare a banquet for international diplomats. Susun's response was a blunt no. He stated that he only cooked in his own refuge and would not abandon the customers already waiting in line. The harsh refusal left the officials stunned, but elevated Susun's reputation to legendary status. He was not chasing elite banquets. His goal was global fame through his own effort. Soon, Susun's name was no longer just trending on social media, it was opening the country's main news broadcasts. Susun's success became a problem for the elite. At the National Culinary Association, the atmosphere was tense. The organization's president, Luguji, listened irritably as he was told that ambassadors from 10 countries were already lining up at the new restaurant. Their prestige was at stake, and being ignored by a newcomer was not an option. Luguji, however, saw an opening. King of Cuisine was only an internet nickname, not an official title. He decided the association should demand Susun's formal qualifications to try to bring him down. The plan was even dirtier. Take advantage of an incoming Japanese diplomatic mission and bring Japan's best chef for a duel. Luguji did not care about national pride or the risks. He only wanted to see Susun publicly humiliated. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Susun felt the chill of someone being talked about behind his back. The place was already too small for so many people, and Yuruo was suggesting renovations to handle the exhausted crowd. Then a luxury bus stopped in front, and foreigners began forcing people out of the line, claiming that every table had been reserved for them. The people who had waited all day did not accept the disrespect. The atmosphere grew tense. A huge security guard began intimidating the customers, but Susun stepped forward and locked the man's arm in place. The guard tried to fight back, but Susun simply squeezed his shoulder, making the giant collapse in tears of pain right in front of everyone. The humiliation was immediate, and the line burst into laughter. In the middle of the chaos, Susun realized the real fight was only beginning. The commotion was interrupted by Luguji, the president of the National Culinary Association, who arrived and put an end to the mess. To everyone's surprise, he slapped his own security guard for intimidating the public, pretending to be a defender of ethics and kindness. Susun simply watched the scene, already seeing through the veteran's performance. The crowd and the girls from his team were impressed by Luguji's rigid posture, believing he was a fair man. With all the ceremony in the world, he formally introduced himself to Susun, while customers recorded every second of that meeting between giants. Luguji tried a diplomatic move. He presented the foreign guests and asked for a small favor so they could skip the line. Susun did not bend. He reinforced that status meant nothing there, and that equality was absolute. If they wanted to get in faster, they could negotiate with the people already waiting. To Jing's surprise, the president accepted the terms and began paying young people in line to give up their spots. Even so, Susun was not fooled by the courtesy. He knew Luguji had not come there just to eat lunch. The foreigners, who were actually embassy staff and spoke Chinese perfectly, were amazed by the flavor of the food. But their leader could not hide his envy of Susun's team of beautiful waitresses. The master simply smiled, waiting for Luguji to finally lay his cards on the table. The president applauded Susun's sharp perception, confirming that the real test was about to begin. Luguji's empty talk started to get tiring. He declared that the title of king was only street gossip, and that in high society, Susun had no status at all. For the association's president, it was unfair for someone to carry that name without proving a real contribution to the country's culinary world. Jing tried to understand how he intended to validate the title, but Susun barely cared. He cut Luguji off mid-speech, saying he needed to go to the bathroom and they would talk later. Yuruo even tried to apologize for her boss's rudeness, but the damage was done. The president was boiling with anger after being ignored like that. Shinchu, the ghost, sensed Luguji's dark aura and was about to attack, but Susun stopped her. He explained that the idiot was actually the missing piece he needed to reach his goal of worldwide fame. His order to Shinchu was clear: just watch the man and report his every move. When Susun returned, the mockery became more refined. He asked Jing to call a plumber because the water had run out, right after shaking Luguji's hand. The president froze, frantically wiping his hands until the table ran out of napkins, which only made him more unhinged. Trying to regain control, Luguji dropped the bomb. A Japanese diplomatic mission was arriving with Sadakotsu, a new prodigy who supposedly surpassed the legendary Koshisai after his sudden death. The challenge was an official cooking competition. Susan accepted the duel immediately, but imposed a condition that put the president on edge. Luguji's plan was simple: use the competition to destroy Susan publicly. He wanted the duel held at the National Exhibition Center, broadcast live with full official pomp. Susan agreed, but with a twist that left the association president speechless. Using the excuse that his current restaurant was too small for television cameras, Susan presented an audacious expansion project. He did not want just a renovation. He demanded the purchase of an entire floor in the most luxurious hotel in the city, decorated with marble and gold. According to him, it would be the ideal setting to elevate the country's prestige on television. Luguji tried to argue about the absurd cost, but Susan simply threatened to cancel everything. With no way out and blinded by his desire for revenge, Luguji promised to secure the money. He nearly cried, not from emotion, but from the pain in his wallet, as he transferred 70 million to ensure everything would be ready within a week. For Susan, that was only the beginning of his financial revenge against those who tried to bring him down. While Luguji called Sadakotsu to guarantee that the destruction plan was perfectly aligned, night fell at Susan's house. The master slept deeply, but his instincts remained sharp. When soft footsteps echoed in the bedroom and a figure approached his bed, the counterattack was instant. In the blink of an eye, Susan drew a knife and pinned the intruder against the mattress. It was Yuruo, trembling with fear and unable to explain what she was doing there in the middle of the night. Yuruo had been terrified of spending the night alone at the restaurant, so she managed to take refuge in Susan's room. The problem was the chaos that followed. Her scream made Jing storm into the room ready for battle. Seeing the scene, Jing refused to hear explanations and started hitting Susan with a shirt, convinced he had done something suspicious. While the confusion unfolded at home, the entire city was buzzing. The press could not stop talking about the new luxury restaurant, but the public only cared about the duel. Luguji was reaching his limit, hating every mention of Susun's king title and placing all his hopes on Sadakotsu's victory to crush that arrogance. On the day of the competition, Sadakotsu arrived to applause, but Susun's station remained empty. With only 1 hour left, the master was still in deep sleep, squeezed in bed between the two girls. Shinshu, the ghost, had to scare them awake. The girls complained about the early wake-up, explaining that they were only there because Susan's room was the only one with air conditioning. The atmosphere at the event was pure tension. Only 5 minutes remained, and Susun was nowhere to be seen. The judges were already fuming, and Luguji was preparing the speech that would bury his rival's reputation by default. At the very last second, just as the host was about to cancel everything, Susun finally appeared, calm and unbothered. Sadakotsu smiled mockingly, assuming the delay was some psychological tactic meant to destabilize her. The host even tried to confirm whether it was a master strategy, but Susun's answer stunned everyone. He had simply overslept because the sleep was too good. The crowd exploded with laughter, interpreting the honesty as the ultimate humiliation of his rival. Sadakotsu burned with anger, while Luguji demanded silence to begin what he believed would be a culinary massacre. The duel started, and panic hit Susun's team. They had completely forgotten the main ingredients. While the master yawned on stage, the audience could not believe the level of indifference. It looked like he had already given up before even turning on the stove. On the other side, Sadakotsu revealed her secret weapon. Beneath a veil, she presented a rare specimen of the legendary winter lace jimmy fish, a luxury ingredient with a capture limit of only 100 per year. The host praised the Japanese chef's meticulous preparation, emphasizing that she had brought a piece worth millions to guarantee victory. With unbelievable audacity, Susun walked over to her station and began examining the fish. He complimented the ingredient's value and, without the slightest embarrassment, asked if he could borrow a small piece, since she would not use the entire fish anyway. Sadakotsu laughed in contempt, convinced that her opponent was desperate. Without elite ingredients, Susun gave an unusual order. He told Jing to fetch whatever leftovers were sitting in the dressing room refrigerator. They returned with simple supermarket items, which made Sadakotsu smile confidently, already picturing her victory. Susun calmly explained that true cooking exists to feed ordinary people every day, not just to display luxury. The starting signal echoed through the hall. Sadakotsu demonstrated lightning-fast cutting techniques with flawless precision. In response, Susun tossed his humble ingredient into the air and shredded it with a single flash of motion. The judges were stunned to realize that despite the massive difference in product quality, the technical skill of both chefs was on the same level. Luguji watched with a sarcastic grin, counting the seconds until Susun's poor man's dish would be crushed by the Japanese masterpiece. Sadakotsu presented her creation, sashimi arranged like a sculpture. The fish looked whole, but was sliced with surgical precision that preserved its absolute freshness. The judges fell into a trance the moment it touched their tongues, feeling the meat melt in their mouths. Without hesitation, they awarded perfect scores. The host already looked regretful. Susun would need a miracle to avoid humiliation and losing his title. Sadakotsu was already celebrating the easy win when Susun calmly ordered the girls to serve his dish. When the lids were lifted, what appeared was a simple homemade carp soup. The rival burst into laughter, mocking the poor choice for a world-class final. Susun merely suggested she save her breath and wait for the result. The moment the judges tasted the first spoonful, silence swallowed the hall. Their expressions changed instantly. One judge even began crying, claiming that mere mortals had no right to evaluate what he called food of the gods. The flavor was something completely beyond reality. When the votes were counted, tension exploded. Almost everyone gave the highest score, but Luguji, determined to bury his rival, gave only 9 points. With that single vote, Sadakotsu technically won by a hair and burst into loud laughter, celebrating the fall of the king. The host and the crowd were stunned by the association president's blatant bias. That was when Susun started clapping sarcastically. He praised Luguji's performance about honesty and morality, but hinted that the game was far from over. Sadakotsu's victorious mood evaporated when they realized Susun still held a card no one, especially the corrupt president, had expected. Susun had not only won in flavor, he exposed the cheating live. He pulled out his phone and projected a video across the arena showing Luguji begging Sadakotsu to destroy him. The association president turned pale. Then the giant screen revealed something even worse: the confession of the real murderer of the legendary master Koshisai, exposing Sadakotsu and Luguji as part of a criminal conspiracy. The celebration instantly turned into chaos. Driven by rage, Sadakotsu pulled out a knife and charged at Susun to kill him. The crowd screamed, but Susun did not even blink. With just 2 fingers, he stopped the blade mid-air and snapped the ancient meteorite metal as if it were glass. Before she could process the shock, Susun punched her with overwhelming force, sending her flying into the stage and shattering the set on impact. He then walked calmly toward the judges' table. Luguji, even after being exposed, still tried to maintain a cynical smile, relying on his connections to escape while quietly threatening Susun's girls. That was his fatal mistake. Susun stopped laughing. When Luguji realized the situation was about to turn from self-defense into a beating, he tried to backpedal and claim it was a joke, but Susun struck him with full fury. The aftermath came quickly. News outlets exploded with headlines about Luguji's arrest for murder and fraud. Susun was officially crowned the king of cuisine, and the video of the battle went viral worldwide, smashing every record and fulfilling all the system's goals. Late that night, while Susun rested after the victory, Jing entered his room and locked the door. She said it was time to deliver the reward for the achievement. To Susun's surprise, Yuruo appeared right behind her, confirming that the prize would be doubled. He had to pinch his own cheek to make sure that such a monumental turn of events was not just a dream. The next morning began lightly, filled with smiles. Jing woke up determined to prepare breakfast, still processing everything that had happened the night before. To her, it was simply the recognition Susun deserved. When he jokingly asked for another thank you, he was rewarded with a pillow to the face and kicked out of the room amid laughter. Inside the bedroom, the girls shared a moment of quiet understanding. Jing noticed that Yuruo was pretending to sleep under the blanket, blushing in embarrassment. To calm her, Jing suggested they consider themselves sisters. After all, Susun's line of admirers was only getting longer, and it would be better if they stood together. Yuruo loved the idea, though she quickly remembered that Leah was also in the race, which made Jing worry that the growing harem might soon spiral completely out of control. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the tension was of a different kind. Shinshu, the ghost, was consumed by jealousy. She complained that even though she had been the key to victory, she could not enjoy the same closeness as the others. With tears in her eyes, she confessed how painful it was to belong to a different world before vanishing into the air, leaving Susun wondering how someone could deal with the emotions of a spirit. The system interrupted the drama with good news. The culinary mission was complete. Susun received the permanent ability of Chinese gastronomy, but he wanted more. He requested another identity swap, and the system delivered something darker: paranormal investigator. Now he could hear the dead, read minds, and see the invisible. The new mission was clear: solve 3 complex crimes within 2 weeks. The challenge was already waiting for him at a hotel in the city of Jiangnan. The local police had reached a dead end. Deputy Director Chu admitted that a full week of investigation had produced nothing. There were no cameras, the autopsy revealed no clear clues, and every lead had vanished. The team was on the verge of giving up when someone suggested bringing in an outside specialist. The officers were skeptical. None of them realized that this expert did not need fingerprints or forensic tricks. He could simply ask the corpse who the killer was. Rumors about a detective capable of hearing the dead sounded like urban legend, something out of a horror movie. For most people, it was impossible, but Deputy Director Chu knew the story was real. That man had once solved an impossible case years ago. After a long mystery, they discovered that the legendary investigator was living in Yangnan under the spotlight, running the powerful Qinjun Corporation. The next morning, the police team stopped in front of the company's building. The mood was filled with disbelief. No one expected that the billionaire president they had been observing for months could also be a master of the occult. Inside the building, the atmosphere among the girls was already heated. Leah served tea to Susun with suspicious sweetness, which instantly triggered rivalry from Jing and Yoruo. Susun, however, seemed distant, sensing a strange energy approaching. When the police were announced, Leah panicked. She tried to drag Susun toward an emergency exit, convinced he was about to be arrested. He did not move. Completely calm, he ordered that the officers be brought to the guest room. While waiting, the investigators whispered among themselves. The chief detective believed the legendary investigator was merely hiding behind the image of a businessman to escape his past. Susun entered the room with perfect composure. Deputy Director Chu shook his hand and froze when he realized the young man looked exactly the same as years ago. The congressman accompanying the team could barely believe that this young president was the same hero who, 13 years earlier, had solved a brutal crime and disappeared without a trace. The silence in the room was broken by memories of that old case, but Susun simply listened, ready to dive once again into the voices only he could hear. The tension grew heavier when the officers finally handed him the files for Case 5113, a brutal massacre in an isolated village. An entire family had been slaughtered. The woman had been assaulted, the father stabbed repeatedly, and the child never had a chance. The crime seemed perfect. Rain that night had washed away fingerprints, and the rural area had no cameras. Even though the police had 4 suspects in mind, they lacked concrete evidence. Susun accepted the challenge and immediately demanded to go to the morgue. Once there, he dismissed the medical examiner, confusing the officers. When he touched the cold forehead of the corpse, he activated his new ability. He had not come to perform an autopsy. He came to listen to what the afterlife had to say. In a silent mental whisper, he promised the victim vengeance in exchange for the truth. A wave of the spirit's pain and rage surged through him, revealing details that human eyes had missed. Armed with information from the dead, Susun headed to the crime scene, an old, isolated house. The detective warned him that the forensic team had already combed through everything and that the mud had erased all traces. Susun ignored the warning, walking through the garden under skeptical police eyes. He crouched near a bush and snapped his fingers, finding exactly what he needed. Using a napkin, he picked up a cigarette butt preserved beneath the leaves. The technical investigation had failed, but the voice of the victim had guided him precisely to the spot where the killer had waited before attacking. The clue was a cigarette from an expensive brand, something completely out of place for that humble household. Since none of the victims smoked, it became obvious that the killer had tried to bury the evidence in the mud but failed. Susun ordered it sent immediately to the laboratory, confident that DNA could still be extracted. The detective watched in amazement as Susun calmly described exactly how the murderer had discarded the cigarette. 5 days later, while Susun was training intensely, the phone rang with the results. The DNA matched the suspects. The arrest operation would take place that very night, and Susun was invited to observe. Shinchu, the ghost, tagged along thinking it would be an adventure, but Susun made it clear that he needed her help for something serious. When they arrived, the situation was already tense. The 4 criminals had anticipated the police ambush and taken an 8-year-old girl hostage on the 5th floor of a building. Vice Mayor Chen was desperate, apologizing repeatedly for the failure of the operation. Without hesitation, Susun proposed trading places with the child, shocking the officers with the madness of the idea. The detective tried to block him, insisting he was just a civilian. Susun silenced everyone with a single demonstration of power. He punched the wall, creating a hole in the structure and collapsing part of the protective barrier. Faced with that monstrous strength, the police realized he was not the weak link in the negotiation. The congressman agreed to the plan, believing Susun's fame would lower the criminal's guard and that his supernatural abilities might resolve the standoff. The criminals shouted orders, keeping a knife against the girl's throat while SWAT units took their positions outside. Susan walked forward calmly, waving as if greeting acquaintances. Confused, the criminals did not recognize him immediately and captured him without resistance. The girl cried desperately while Susan calmly introduced himself as the billionaire owner of the Chinjun Corporation. The kidnappers were stunned, unable to understand why such a powerful figure was standing there. Susan lied, claiming the girl was his relative, and offered to exchange himself for her. The criminals initially demanded $5 million, but quickly realized that with the police surrounding the building, money would not buy them an escape. Having a billionaire hostage, however, was far better insurance. The exchange was made. As soon as the girl ran back into her mother's arms, Susan sat down in a chair while a blade pressed against his own throat. With a cold smile, he gave Shinshu a silent command. The door slammed shut with a thunderous crash, sealing the criminals inside the room with him, cut off from the rest of the world. Panic suddenly changed sides. When the gang leader, his hand shaking, tried to drive the knife forward, Susan was no longer there. The counterattack unfolded like a choreography of poetic justice. The first punch exploded across the criminal's face in the name of the murdered child. The second strike, a humiliating slap, was for the honor of the violated woman. The third, a brutal kick that shattered another thug's knee, carried the message of the murdered father. Susan calmly wiped his knuckles while the four criminals groaned on the floor, realizing too late that they had locked themselves in a room with a monster. Even while writhing in pain, the leader tried to threaten him, swearing he would destroy Susan's company if he survived. Susan only looked at him with cold contempt. He did not need to kill them himself. He opened the door for the special forces, but before leaving, he allowed Shinshu to finish this psychological work on the scum. The air inside turned freezing. Shinshu's ghostly whisper paralyzed the gang leader. The terror was so absolute that the criminals' screams echoed through the building, frightening even the officers outside. In the news, the closing of Case 5013 became a scandal. The murderers were taken into custody, screaming about ghosts, but the detective publicly dismissed it as a collective guilt-induced breakdown. Shinshu returned to Susun glowing with pride, demanding her reward for the dirty work. With no escape, he gave her a kiss, but the ghost wanted more. She was determined to receive the same treatment as his human girlfriends, but the sudden vibration of a phone saved Susun from a very complicated situation with the supernatural. On the other end of the call was panic. Leah was being hunted. Walking along a deserted street, she had noticed a man in a cap following her. She tried to escape through a park, but the attacker was faster. He grabbed her from behind and pressed a cloth soaked with ether against her face, knocking her unconscious. Just as the criminal thought he had won, a cold voice appeared behind him, calmly listing statistics about recent murders. It was Susan, standing there with Li Hu, who was seeking justice after an attack on her husband. The criminal tried to fight back with a knife, but the weapon suddenly flew from his hand and landed in Susan's grip, as if the metal itself obeyed him. Cornered and trembling, the attacker was dragged to an abandoned warehouse. There he was tied up and forced to kneel before the city's new investigator. Leia, already recovering, confirmed the ether on the cloth, while Susan stared down at the prisoner, ready to discover who the next target on that list of deaths would be. The kidnapper tried to pretend it was just a simple robbery, but the lie did not last. To make him talk, Susan showed no mercy. The blade cut into the man's leg, and the scream of pain brought out the truth. The plan had been far darker: abduct Leah and drag her somewhere isolated to continue a series of horrific crimes. Using his mind-reading ability, Susan uncovered a trail of blood. The scum confessed to 6 identical crimes, all involving women who were assaulted before being murdered. The killer begged to surrender to the police, believing prison would protect him, but Susan had other plans. 6 lives could not be repaid by a simple jail sentence. Before leaving, he ordered Liu to bring 6 large men to the warehouse for a conversation with the prisoner, walking away while the criminal's screams echoed behind him. Leah was still shaking inside the car, completely traumatized. Susan realized leaving her alone in an empty apartment would be cruel, so he brought her to his own house. When they arrived, Jing and Yuruo immediately went on alert at the sight of the new guest, but Leah's fragile state softened the tension. Inside the guest room, she refused to let go of Susan, clinging to him for protection until exhaustion finally took over. The next morning turned into pure domestic chaos. Susan stepped out of the room only to find Jing armed with a butcher knife, furiously hunting flies with ridiculous intensity. To make matters worse, Yuruo nearly scalded him by throwing boiling water from a pot in the wrong direction, ignoring the sink completely. In the middle of that mess, the 2 girls cornered him, demanding explanations about Leah's arrival and complaining that the space was becoming too small for so many people. Even at the university, the tension continued. Jing ignored him completely, walking past both him and the bouquet of flowers he brought. Susun sighed, realizing that dealing with spirits and killers was far easier than understanding the moods of the women in his life. Without patience for the silent treatment, he simply picked Jing up in his arms and carried her away by force, determined to settle the argument his own way. The restaurant soon became the stage for a drama worthy of a soap opera. Jing still had a massive pout, ignoring Susun as he tried to make peace by offering her a piece of meat on a fork. She covered herself and blocked her ears, declaring she did not want to hear any explanation about the previous night. From the car outside, Liu watched the scene and wondered how his boss could look so cold towards someone so devoted. The tension shifted when Liu noticed the phone in Susun's hand. It was not a new device. It belonged to the maniac captured the day before. Liu panicked, warning that the police could track them through it, but what Susun found in the message history was far worse. A photo of Jing and Susun inside the restaurant, taken only 5 minutes earlier. They were the next target. Jing felt a chill run down her spine and began nervously scanning the area. Susun remained calm, ordering her to move away while Liu tried to identify suspicious people through the radio. The conclusion came quickly. Yesterday's attacker had not been working alone. There were 5 maniacs in total, and they had no idea that one of their members had already been brutally retired by Susun. The problem was that the chat history had been wiped. To get new clues, Susun needed to question someone who could no longer lie. He went to the place where the first killer's body had been dumped inside a submerged cage. While Liu nearly vomited from the smell, Susun touched the corpse's arm and activated his perceptive vision. The dead man's memories revealed a cult-like group of masked men who did not even know each other's real names. They organized themselves through the internet, sending photos of potential victims to decide who would fall next. With the pieces of the puzzle finally clear, Susun stepped into the car with a deadly expression. The hunt for the remaining 4 had just become personal. He took control of the dead man's phone and sent a message in the group chat. The target was marked, and the cabin's address was ready. The other maniacs, unaware of the trap, celebrated their partner's return and confirmed they would gather for the hunt the next day. When the 5 psychopaths arrived at the location wearing animal masks, they sneaked into the cabin, already salivating for their next victim. But the game flipped the moment the lights went out. When the lights came back on, they did not find a helpless woman. Instead, dozens of rifle barrels were pointed directly at their heads. Liu stepped forward with a sarcastic smile and calmly informed them that they had come to the wrong address. Instead of the police station, the destination was an abandoned building. Hung by ropes, the maniacs panicked when they saw the agents throw the lifeless body of Rat, the first member, into the middle of the room. The psychological terror was heavy. Liu lit a cigarette and threw every detail of the 6 deaths they carried on their backs right in their faces. Threatened with death, the mood among the criminals quickly soured. Susun, playing with the cowards' minds, offered a chance. Only one of them could be forgiven. The result was a spectacle of betrayal. One began exposing the other, detailing who struck the first blow and who had been the cruelest during the torture. They slandered each other and buried themselves in rotten confessions while trying to save their own skin. Liu listened to everything with disgust, recording every word. When the maniacs finally paused to breathe, believing the bargain was real, they noticed Susun's icy stare. Forgiveness had never been on the table. He only needed them to confess everything in front of the cameras to make sure none of them would leave death row alive. The maniac's fate was sealed right there. Liu wouldn't dirty his hands, but he made sure justice would be ruthless. He brought Chief Chen into the room, who listened to every filthy confession that had been recorded. The verdict was direct. With what they had admitted, they would receive multiple executions with no chance of appeal. The group was taken to the police wagon, and the case exploded in the media as the police's biggest victory of the year. Far from the bloodshed, Susun's life returned to an almost normal rhythm. At Jing's house, the atmosphere was family-like. Her mother insisted on cooking fish and was already dropping hints about marriage, saying her daughter needed to learn how to handle the kitchen before walking down the aisle. Jing, dying of embarrassment, dragged Susun to her room to escape the lecture, while her brother Hyungun was left to wash the dishes under their mother's orders. In the room, Jing didn't waste time with small talk and went straight on the attack, leaving Susun surprised by her boldness. He even tried to joke to ease the mood, but she made it clear she wasn't joking. When they came back downstairs, Hyungun looked at them sideways, fully aware that the room tour hadn't just been to admire the decoration, but Susun quickly changed the subject when he saw the anger on his brother-in-law's face. The reason for Hyungun's fury was another one, the release of Chen Taeyan. The bastard had been freed for lack of evidence, even after destroying the life of a loyal employee by getting involved with the man's wife and driving him to suicide. Susun already knew everything thanks to his abilities and followed the media circus the villain staged outside the courthouse. While Taeyan gave a cynical speech pretending to be innocent, a raw egg exploded on his face. It was the dead man's mother, screaming for justice and accusing the businessman of adultery and cruelty. As the guards dragged her away, the villain wiped the yolk from his face with a cold smile, confident that the court had already declared him innocent. He just didn't know that the city's new paranormal detective had already marked him as the next target. Chen Taeyan left the courthouse posing like a saint. With absurd cynicism, he promised compensation to the mother of the man he himself had destroyed, while holding his assistant by the waist and laughing at everyone. Hyungun, watching everything, boiled with anger at the bastard's impunity, while Susun simply observed, recording every detail of that disgusting scene. Shortly after, at the corporation's headquarters, Chief Chen appeared to secretly thank Susun. The public didn't know it, but the king of the kitchen was the genius behind solving the last two unsolved cases. Chen brought along Wing, the chief of Jiangdong, who was humiliated. He knew Taeyan's release was a stain on his career and desperately needed justice. The case was heavy. The deceased, Lan, had been an exemplary manager at Taeyan's company. The villain's scheme was cruel. He constantly sent Lan on business trips just so he could stay with the employee's wife. One day, Lan returned early and caught the two in the act. The scandal was covered up. Lan disappeared, and everyone thought he had accepted a bribe to vanish, until his body appeared. The conversation was interrupted by brutal news. Lan's mother, the elderly woman who had thrown the egg at the villain, had just been murdered. The killer fled and drove the car into the river to erase the traces. That was the final straw for Susun. Grief turned into pure fury. With no time for bureaucracy, Susun ordered Leah to book the best hotel in Jiangdong for that same night. Chief Chen tried to warn him that traveling by land would take 5 hours, but Susun wouldn't wait a second longer. Within minutes, the sound of helicopter blades cut through the sky. The master was on his way to end Chen Taeyan's reign once and for all. The helicopter sliced through the sky with everyone on board, while Leah was already arranging contact with Chen Taeyan's team. The police chiefs could barely process the speed of the operation. In Taeyan's office, the mood was one of dirty celebration. He was at the feet of his secretary, rewarding her for erasing every trace of the previous crime, when the phone rang. The announcement that the powerful president of Chinjun Corporation wanted an immediate meeting at the hotel left Taeyan in shock. He didn't understand the reason, but fear spoke louder. The secretary tried to seduce him so they would ignore the appointment, but the villain knew that standing Susan up would mean the immediate collapse of his business. He felt cornered, but tried to stay optimistic, believing he would receive a $1 billion partnership offer. In the luxury suite, Susan and the officers waited. The master knew Taeyan's greed would bring him there. The villain entered the room overflowing with disgusting cynicism, bringing an extremely expensive wine to seal the meeting. Susun didn't even move, maintaining an icy look of contempt for the alcohol and the man in front of him. Trying to be the perfect host, Taeyan brought in a receptionist in costume to serve the group, making sexist comments and offering extra services. He even had the audacity to compare the girl to Leah, suggesting that his employee should dress more provocatively. Leah appeared shortly after, and her natural beauty left everyone in the room, including Taeyan's receptionist, humiliated. The villain still thought he was in a business meeting, unaware that the paranormal trap had already closed around him. Tai noticed the atmosphere was strange and tried to serve tea, but Susan turned the cup upside down on the table, making it clear he wouldn't accept anything from him. The humiliating gesture shocked the police chiefs present, while the villain tried to keep his composure. Susun didn't want to risk being poisoned or ending up like Lan's mother. To end the little game, Susun stood up and went straight to the point. When he touched Tai's shoulder, he used his mind reading to extract the whole truth about the woman's murder. The businessman tried to dodge it, claiming lack of evidence, but Susun had already seen everything he needed. He then gave an ultimatum. Either Tai declared total bankruptcy by the end of the month, or he would be arrested right there for the crimes he had committed. Taeyan, thinking he had the upper hand, laughed at the threat and ordered his receptionist to demand an apology under threat of a lawsuit. Susun simply shut the woman up and, in a quick move, delivered a sharp slap across Tai's face. The impact left the officers in shock, but it showed who was really in charge of the room. The villain tried to growl that he was on his own territory, but Susan cornered him with secrets no one should know. He revealed how Tai used his employees' wives and detailed the psychological pressure that drove Lan to suicide, using threats against the manager's family. The master went further and dug up a crime from 3 years earlier. He exposed how Tai used thugs to coerce families into signing the demolition of their homes, pocketing all the compensation money while making the victims believe the government was to blame. Cornered by the dark past that had just come to light, Tai's smile completely disappeared. The bridge contract was already theirs. Everything settled quietly behind the scenes. Taiyan still tried to act arrogant, demanding proof and accusing Su Shun of defamation, but the game changed when Shun dropped 6 random numbers. It was the code to the man's private safe. The impact was immediate. Taiyan collapsed. The criminal who once set the rules fell to his knees, begging for mercy and offering to become a loyal lapdog. The boss didn't even pay attention. He dismissed the offer and turned his back. What he didn't know was that the police had already recorded everything. At the restaurant, the mood grew tense. While they ate, Taiyan snapped, pulled out a knife, and launched a treacherous attack from behind. 2 cooks tried to intervene, but Su Shun was faster. A violent slap cracked across the attacker's face. The blow was so strong that Taiyan flew into the wall and blacked out instantly. When the paramedics arrived, the man's face was a deformed mess, like he had collided head-on with a truck. The chief, impressed by Shun's efficiency, guaranteed the investigation would be ruthless. At that very moment, the system notified the mission's success and delivered the reward: permanent mind reading. In the parking lot, the group prepared to leave. Susan was worn out from the helicopter trip, while Ginchu vented stress on her phone. Liu, at the wheel, tried to please the boss with a massage, but Shun only wanted the silence of home. Mentally, he embraced his new persona, the mercenary king. Memories from 4 years ago resurfaced. A failed mission, the team wiped out, and only 3 survivors left, thirsty for revenge that had seemed impossible until now. A master of strategy, weapons, and survival, Shun had a new goal: hunt down those responsible. But the peace didn't last long. In the rearview mirror, Liu spotted armored vehicles on their tail. The trap had been set since they left the office, and the smell of war was already in the air. The convoy turned into hell when the armored vehicles opened fire, blowing out the tires and forcing Liu's car to stop on the shoulder. It was clear right away. These weren't pickpockets, but professional killers. As bullets whizzed by, Liu ordered them toward Hong Road. In the middle of the chaos, he grabbed the phone from Chinchu's hand. She had been distracted playing a game, and offered her something better: real targets to take down. The girl's expression changed instantly. The chase became entertainment for her. The maneuver was aggressive. Chinchu appeared out of nowhere, startling the enemy driver and sending the steering wheel into a panicked spin. The result was a hard crash into a pole, while the second car of the pursuers sped past the accident. One of the mercenaries, furious with his allies' incompetence, climbed onto the vehicle's roof with a heavy weapon, ready to obliterate Shun's car. But before he could pull the trigger, Chinchu appeared right in his sights, jumping like a ghost. The shock was his fatal mistake. What looked like a physical attack was actually a bomb. The device rose, traced a perfect arc, and struck the criminal's vehicle dead on. Mission accomplished. Shun hugged the girl, praising the dirty work, and they headed home. Chief Chen, still in shock, promised severe punishment for the survivors and surrounded the area with guards 24 hours a day. Liu reinforced that their loyalty was absolute, but Susun cut the mood, pushing his subordinate away from the chief. Chen tried to keep his composure, dismissing the police and saying he would handle everything right there. The tension was broken by a scream at the entrance. Sijing Yuruo burst in crying, pushing past security and throwing herself into Shun's arms. He tried to calm her, reminding her there were eyes everywhere, but her questions wouldn't stop. The problem was that, to him, those people were still complete strangers. The girls gave him no space. They grabbed Shun by the hands, insisting he should no longer leave the house for safety. A celebration had been planned, but a phone call cut the moment. It was Liu. Before Sijing could process the call, a scream of terror echoed from the other side of the line. Liu was in danger, tied to a chair, and the kidnappers gave an ultimatum: 20 minutes for Shun to appear at the office. Even hearing the girl's desperate pleas for him not to go, he didn't hesitate. Sushun ignored the questions at home and left. He gave strict orders for Liu to protect Zijin and Yuru with his life, ensuring that not a single hair on their heads would be touched, but he refused any escort. He would handle it alone. When he arrived at the building, the elevator went straight to the boardroom floor. The door was locked, but the moment it opened, one of the criminals aimed his gun at the empty hallway. That was his mistake. Shun appeared like a shadow, clearing the room with a precise kick. A second man tried to attack, but he was stopped by a heavy punch and pinned to the floor in a technical move, his arm twisted behind his back. The girl, still in shock, tried to pull the trigger at the intruder, but the restrained man shouted for her to stop. He realized too late that Shun didn't need bodyguards. His brute strength was more than enough to wipe out anyone there. As he wiped his hands, Shun stared at the familiar faces. Flashbacks of an old operations team returned to his mind, bringing a disturbing question. What were those ghosts from the past doing there again? The orders had been to never cross paths again, but fate had other plans. As he untied the ropes binding Liao, Sushin calmly treated the cut on her mouth. In the middle of the rescue, the tension rose when the intruder decided to come clean. She introduced herself as Mandala, and to everyone's shock, claimed to be Shun's girlfriend. In disbelief, Shun took her outside the room for a private conversation. He wanted to understand why she had returned and whether her interest was financial, but the reason ran much deeper. They had leads on the traitor who caused the tragedy 4 years earlier. Mandala carried a visceral hatred. Beyond losing her teammates, she still dealt with the physical scars and trauma left by that failed mission. She questioned whether Shun had gone soft, living a life of luxury, but he cut her off cold, asking when they were leaving. Mandala took his irritation as a sign that he would join the hunt. What she wanted was bloody revenge to honor the dead, and her excitement was so intense that she even knocked over a chair as she moved closer to him. The plan was set. Everything would begin the next day. The first step was an escort mission to regroup what remained of the team. The escort target was the very person who held information about the traitor. Shun found it strange that they were still receiving orders when the group had been reduced to just 3 people. The client, a princess from a Middle Eastern conglomerate, offering valuable intel as payment. Mandala even tried a seductive move, but Shun turned his back and walked out of the room, ignoring the attempt. At the reception desk, he ran into Liao, who was still trembling with fear and apologizing for what had happened. Shun showed no resentment. The next morning, when he called the elevator, he was caught off guard. The princess herself would be sent directly to the hotel. Although they claimed the Dragon Kingdom was the safest place in the world, Shun, remembering yesterday's attack, knew reality was very different. There was a large bounty involved, and he was determined to find out who was pulling the strings. As soon as the elevator doors opened, the scene looked like a war zone. The corridor was packed with armed agents. Princess Kelly's security had taken over the entire floor. When Shun approached the indicated room, he was stopped by someone called Agent Jones, who led a swarm of guards. Jones, arrogant, blocked the entrance. He warned that no one would pass without a thorough search, ignoring whoever Shun might be. Mandala, watching closely, let out an ironic smile. She knew that stranger was the mercenary king, the very Satan of the battlefield. Jones felt the pressure and stepped back, afraid of embarrassing himself in front of his subordinates, but still tried to keep his posture and demanded an explanation for Shun's boldness. The tension exploded when Jones, losing patience, drew his gun and pointed it at Shun, accusing him of being responsible for the end of the former elite squad. Shun's move was a blur. In a second, he disarmed the agent, turned the barrel, and pressed it against Jones's own forehead, daring him to pull the trigger. The other guards panicked, aiming their rifles at Shun, who simply held an icy stare. He warned them, pointing a gun at him without the intention to use it was any man's last mistake. The situation only avoided turning into a massacre because Princess Kelly's voice came from inside the room authorizing his entry. Before crossing the door, Shun delivered the final blow to the guards' morale. With a sharp movement of one hand, he completely disassembled Jones's pistol. The pieces fell to the floor like trash. The agents stood frozen, processing the superhuman skill they had just witnessed. Inside, Shun came face to face with Kelly. The surprise was mutual, but she was direct. She knew his reputation and trusted no one else to guarantee her life. Without wasting time on pleasantries, Shun went straight to the point. He wanted to know if she truly had the name of the traitor who destroyed his team 4 years earlier. Princess Kelly was blunt. She would give him what he wanted, but the price was the mission's success. The first detail was already explosive. One of the men who attacked Shun the day before belonged to the Wild Wolf group. Mandala completed the thought, explaining that the group was new, only 2 years old, but backed by an extremely powerful sponsor. While Kelly processed that she was standing before the legendary Satan, the man who held the titles of King of Assassins and King of Mercenaries, Shun connected the dots. The name Wilson flashed through his mind like lightning. Everything pointed to him as the target. Despite the mutual respect, the danger was real. Kelly revealed that the enemy behind everything was her own older brother, a family power struggle that had spilled over in blood. Shun, even shocked by the rich family drama, shook the princess's hand and gave his word he would be her shield. Time jumped to the inside of a cargo plane at dawn. Shinu was a mess. yawning and complaining about the hour, while Shun kept his eyes on the laptop, reviewing every detail. The plan was bold: infiltration by parachute jump. Only 20 minutes remained before the jump when concern about the princess's safety came up. Mandala, however, assured them that Kelly wasn't a porcelain doll. She had trained since childhood and would handle the free fall without problems. In the middle of the preparations, an alert from Ku shifted the focus. She sensed they were being watched in a sinister way. The description was precise: brown hair, a hooked nose, and a striking scar over the right eye. It was Agent Jones. Apparently, the guy hadn't swallowed the humiliation from the hotel and still doubted who the real master was there. The conversation about Agent Jones was cut short as soon as Miss Kelly approached with 2 glasses. Shun, a master at hiding his intentions, changed the subject immediately and complimented the princess's dress, leaving her embarrassed. They toasted, but the tension in the air was invisible to her, although Shun could feel the traitor's eyes burning into his back. The warning came from the captain. It was time to jump. The group launched into the void, and the descent was precise. When they touched the ground, Shun acted quickly, checking the map and confirming they were at the exact meeting point waiting for the convoy. The problem was that the communication signal was unstable, forcing him to move a bit away to try to make contact. Before leaving, he gave a clear order: no one takes their eyes off Kelly. That turned out to be her luck. As the princess removed her jump gear, Mandala spotted the deadly glow of a red laser fixed on the girl's chest. Without thinking, Mandala threw herself over her, knocking her to the ground seconds before the shot. Chaos erupted. Shun identified the sniper's position and ordered everyone to take cover. From his hiding spot, he fired back with surgical precision using a rifle. The shot hit the enemy behind a tree, followed by a scream of agony. To secure their escape, Shun threw a grenade and created a wall of fire, buying time for the group to retreat. During the desperate run, the princess stumbled, still in shock. She couldn't understand how the enemy knew the exact landing location, since that information was restricted to a tiny circle of people. Shun was blunt. There was a traitor among them. The doubt hung in the air for only a second, until the cold barrel of a gun appeared. Agent Jones stepped out of the shadows, aiming directly at the group and blocking Shun's path. The mask had finally fallen, leaving Miss Kelly frozen in front of the betrayal of her own bodyguard.